I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen, she stammered, her voice thin and trembling. Is that true? I turned to my sister, anger bubbling just below the surface. Now's not the time for this, she snapped, trying to deflect. Lily, you need to come first, my voice cracked, raw and urgent. I caught myself mid-motion, hand raised, trembling in the air between us. A line I never thought I'd cross hovered so close. My breath caught, and shame poured in. I lowered my arm slowly, my chest tight with the weight of what had just almost happened. This moment, this ugly, shattering moment, would stay with me forever, a memory buried so deep I'd never let it surface. It all started with a promise to pick up my niece, Lily, from preschool, a promise forced on me by my sister. Pick her up tomorrow too, she had said the night before, her voice clipped. Why are you always so desperate? I'd snapped back. You're a stay-at-home mom, you've got the time. That's not the point, she said, brushing me off. In the background, I heard Lily's tiny, hacking cough. Is Lily sick? I asked sharply. No, she's fine, my sister replied too quickly. But she's coughing. It's nothing, look, can you just keep her for a while? For how long? A week, I'm going abroad, she said flatly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. What? My voice rose, disbelief edging into fury. I can't do that. Well, she said coldly, then I'll just leave her at the preschool. If nobody picks her up, that's on you. You're impossible, I spat. But the thought of my niece being abandoned like that forced my hand. I begrudgingly agreed, telling myself it was for Lily's sake. The next day, I got a frantic call from the preschool hours before I was meant to pick her up. Ms. Taylor, we've been trying to reach Lily's mother, but we can't get through to her. You're listed as the emergency contact. Lily collapsed at school. She's been taken to the hospital. My heart plummeted. I raced to the hospital, but when I arrived, the sight before me felt like a punch to the chest. Lily was lying there, surrounded by machines, her tiny body frail and motionless. The doctor explained that she'd been running a fever and collapsed during playtime. The preschool had called for an ambulance when they couldn't reach my sister. At the hospital, the preschool director cornered me. Her face was pale, her voice tight with barely concealed anger. You're Lily's aunt, right? Yes, I said weakly. We've tried calling her mother countless times. Her work said she's on vacation. Do you know where she is? She's overseas, I admitted, my voice barely audible. The director's eyes widened in disbelief. Overseas? She sent her child to school in this condition and then just left the country? I swallowed hard, shame burning my throat as the director recounted the day's events. Lily had come to school with a flushed face, clearly unwell. They'd checked her daily temperature sheet, something required to be filled out by parents each morning. It was blank. The preschool refused to accept Lily that morning. Her temperature was 37.8 degrees Celsius, above the 37.5 degree limit for attendance. When the staff pointed this out, they told my sister to take her home. But my sister waved off their concern with a dismissive smile. Her temperature's always a little high. It's not a problem, she insisted, brushing past the teacher. Despite their protests, she left Lily at the preschool and walked out the door. The staff tried calling her multiple times throughout the day, but her phone went unanswered. Frustrated and worried, they eventually called my parents, only to find that they weren't home. They were both at work. Desperate, the preschool dug through old records and found a year-old emergency contact number. It was mine. This should never have happened, the preschool director said, her voice trembling as she stood by Lily's hospital bed. Her usual composed demeanor had cracked under the weight of the situation, tears pooling in her eyes. I am so sorry, I whispered, guilt wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I'll contact my sister. I apologized again to the director and the chaperone before they reluctantly left to return to the school. Immediately, I dialed my sister's number. The line was dead. I tried again, and again, dozens of calls, hundreds, each one unanswered. I called my parents, explaining the situation in hurried, broken sentences. They rushed to the hospital as fast as they could, my mother clutching her phone like a lifeline. It's okay, she said over and over, though it sounded like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. Lily's going to be okay. We're at the hospital. Everything will be fine. But it wasn't fine. The doctors tried everything they could, but Lily's condition only worsened. Her tiny body, so full of life just days before, began to fail her. I kept calling my sister, desperation mounting with every unanswered ring, but no matter how many times I tried, there was only silence on the other end. 2 days later, that fragile little life slipped away. Lily, only 2 years old, passed without her mother's touch, without her mother's presence. How could something so cruel, so heartless, happen? I couldn't stop the tears. They poured freely, blurring the sterile walls of the hospital around me. The grief was unbearable, a heavy weight pressing against my chest, and no amount of apologies or explanations would ever bring her back. As I touched Lily's cold, fragile body, a wave of guilt washed over me. Why didn't I ask my sister where she was going? Why didn't I stop her from leaving? I couldn't stop the questions from swirling in my mind, each one a blade of blame cutting deeper into my heart. "It's not your fault," my mother whispered, her voice barely audible over my sobs, but even as she said the words, tears streamed down her face, matching my grief in their depth. I tried over and over to reach my husband, to tell him what had happened, but his phone was unreachable, just like everyone else. Time dragged on, each moment heavier than the last. In the end, I arranged my niece's funeral without a word from my sister. The day of the funeral came, and my sister finally called. I had my phone with me, though I hadn't expected to answer it. The monks were chanting as I sat there, staring at Lily's small, lifeless form. My phone buzzed, and I answered it without thinking. "Oh, hey, thanks for taking care of Lily," my sister's voice chirped from the other end, casual as ever. "I just landed at the airport. On my way home. What do you want as a souvenir?" I froze. "You." I choked out, rage and disbelief suffocating my words. What is it?" "I can't hear you," she said, irritated. What are you doing?" My voice cracked, sharp and full of fury. The monks chanting halted as my words rang through the room. "Huh? What's with the attitude?" she asked, completely oblivious to the devastation around her. You took a child's life," I shouted, unable to hold back any longer. "Lily, she died. Do you even have the faintest idea how lonely she was? This isn't funny, we're not laughing." The silence that followed felt suffocating. I took several deep breaths, trying to compose myself. "I'm in the middle of Lily's funeral. Get back here as soon as you can," I said through clenched teeth, before hanging up. I apologized to the monks for disrupting their chant, but one of them gently placed his hand on my head, offering silent comfort. Later, as we prepared to leave for the crematorium, my sister arrived, out of breath and frantic. Behind her was my husband, looking equally disoriented. I couldn't believe my eyes. "Why is he here?" My sister collapsed by Lily's side, her sobs filling the air. Why did this happen?" she cried, but no one responded to her. My relatives stood around her, cold and silent, but none of them said a word to place blame. I think they were sparing Lily, even now. I didn't speak to either of them until after the cremation. It felt as though Lily was waiting for her mother, though she would never get that chance. Once the cremation was done, we returned to my parents' house. My sister took the brunt of my parents' anger. I sat in silence, listening to their accusations until my gaze fell on the luggage near the door. Why were they both carrying luggage from the same airport? I noticed the airline sticker on the handle of each suitcase. They had come from the same place? My sister clamped her mouth shut, refusing to speak, but my husband finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice flat. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Is that true?" I asked my sister, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked away, her silence louder than words. "Then what?" I pressed. "Is this really the time for your excuses? You have to put Lily first," I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and fury. I raised my hand, but I froze before it could land on either of them. My anger wasn't about their betrayal, it was about what they had done to my niece. It was something I couldn't forgive, no matter what. "Stop crying, you don't have the right to shed tears," I spat, my voice trembling with rage. "You ignored hundreds of calls from me. Why is it so hard to think something could have happened to your own child, while you two were wrapped up in your own selfish affairs? Lily was suffering, she died, and it's because of you. You'll never be forgiven for this. You should die a slow, agonizing death for what you did." "I'm sorry," my sister murmured, her voice breaking, but I could hear the emptiness in her words. "Do you think that apology makes up for what you did? Do you think this is your penance to Lily? You're lying to yourself. You're just as guilty as he is. You ignored my calls, too. You left my niece to die, and you're just as responsible. Go to hell. My parents didn't stop me, they stood in silence, watching the destruction unfold, but they didn't intervene. Don't you ever show your face here again. You're not my daughter anymore. My mother's voice cracked as she spoke, but her words were resolute. I can't forgive you. Get out, now. Why? Why am I the only one to blame for all of this? I don't even consider you my family anymore. My sister left, her face pale, without even a glance at Lily's remains. We would discuss her divorce later. My husband stood there, motionless, his guilt written all over his face. He didn't speak, but he handed over everything, our shared assets, the alimony, settling everything with a cold finality. The divorce was quick, just as empty as his apology. You think this is your atonement? You think this will wash away your sins? Fool, you'll carry them with you for the rest of your life. My sister and my husband were both charged with child abuse. They fought their cases, but no one stood with them, not even the court-appointed attorneys. My parents and I spoke nothing but the truth. In the end, my sister received a 5-year sentence. My husband, who had known about Lily's fever and still let her go to preschool, was sentenced to 2 years. 5 years and 2 years. How is a life worth only 7 years? The emptiness in my chest deepened. These two would never see the light of day again. 6 years have passed since that day. I remarried and gave birth to a beautiful child, though I'll never forget Lily. It's my child who has slowly healed my heart. I want to be the mother I always dreamed of being, one who is always there, no matter what. They say sin never truly goes away. It follows you, a shadow that will never leave. And they will carry it with them for the rest of their lives. But even that isn't enough. Because human life is precious, and nothing can bring Lily back.
Hello, are you Yumi's mother? I'm calling from the nursery school. Ha! What is it? I was puzzled by the sudden call from the nursery school. At first, I thought it might be some kind of prank, but then the teacher on the other end of the line spoke in a somewhat stern tone. Could you please come to pick up Yumi? The time we can keep her has already passed. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. I am sorry, but my daughter passed away a month ago. My name is Hazel. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a company employee. Currently, I'm dating a man named Nathan. We met at a mixer, and since we were the same age and had similar interests, we hit it off. He seemed like a typical company employee, stable, calm, and sensible. These qualities are important to me, especially since we're at an age where marriage is on the horizon. It's no longer just about appearances. Nathan is a kind person who exceeds my expectations and makes me feel at ease. On our dates, he always comes up with creative ideas, and when we spend time at his place, he prepares delicious meals with impressive skill. This eggplant dish is really good, isn't it? He said one evening, serving up a meal. It's surprisingly easy. I just make it quickly in the microwave. That's amazing. You're really good at Japanese cuisine, I replied, impressed. Yeah, actually my family runs a small restaurant. Really? This was something I learned when we first started dating. Nathan's family lives in the countryside and operates a small restaurant. He learned to cook from his father, who is a chef, and as a result, he's very skilled in the kitchen, capable of making a variety of dishes. Do you have any siblings? I asked. Yeah, I have a younger sister, he answered. Knowing that he had a sister meant he was the eldest son, which made me wonder if he might take over the family business someday. What are you thinking about doing in the future? You know, with your job, I inquired. After a pause, he replied, after working at the company for a bit longer, I plan to return to my hometown and take over the family's small restaurant. I think I'll start with a training period. Oh, is that so? I was a bit taken aback by his plans. If we were to get married, I'd have to leave my current job and move with him. I work as a web designer, and I really enjoy my job. I hadn't considered quitting anytime soon. But at the same time, I wanted to be with Nathan. Before I knew it, I found myself discussing this dilemma with a senior colleague at work. Then why don't you try applying for remote work? She suggested. Really? The advantage of our job is that we can do it anywhere as long as we have a computer. If you manage your work properly, some companies will allow you to work from home. I'm sure your company can accommodate that too. Is that so? Hearing her words filled me with hope. This meant I could continue my current job even if I moved with Nathan. In fact, after I talked to Nathan about the future, he admitted that he had been thinking he would have to make me quit my job and take me with him if we got married, which had made things feel a bit awkward between us. I immediately asked my boss if it was possible to switch to remote work. "If you meet the criteria set by the company, there should be no problem," was the response. As for the internet connection and computer, everything was falling into place. This meant that if I wanted to, I could move to Nathan's hometown right away. After confirming with my boss, I shared the news with Nathan on our next date. "Really? So you mean you can continue your current job while living in my hometown?" he asked, a mixture of surprise and relief on his face. "Yes, that's possible," I replied with a smile. "That's great." He looked genuinely relieved, and seeing his expression made me feel the same way. It didn't take long after that for us to decide to get married. "Hazel, if you don't mind, would you marry me and move to my hometown?" Nathan asked one evening, his voice filled with sincerity. "Yes, I'd love to," I said without hesitation. And so, we decided to tie the knot. When I told my parents about the move, they seemed a bit sad but ultimately supported me, sending me off with the words, "Be happy." Nathan and I got married and started our life together. He began working at his family's small restaurant under his father's guidance. Since the restaurant was next to his parents' house, we initially lived with them. At the suggestion of my in-laws, who wanted Nathan to focus on learning the business without worrying about household chores, they proposed that we stay with them to lighten our load. However, I would later realize that this decision was a mistake. Living with my in-laws turned out to be more challenging than I had anticipated. "Hazel, how long do you intend to stay holed up in your room?" my mother-in-law, Susan, said one day, knocking on the door forcefully. "I'm working, Susan. I'm actually working right now," I explained. "Working? You're always in your room. What kind of work are you doing? Are you trying to deceive me with that excuse?" she retorted, her tone filled with suspicion. "I'll never accept it," my mother-in-law declared. "But I really am working," I insisted. "Don't lie. You're just playing around, drawing pictures on that computer, aren't you?" she snapped, glancing at my screen. "This is called web design. It's my job," I explained, trying to remain patient. "I won't be fooled. It's shameful for an adult to be wasting time drawing pictures," she retorted. My mother-in-law likely held old-fashioned views and didn't seem to grasp the concept of working from home. To her, I wasn't really working. I was just cooped up at home, neglecting household chores. I never thought I'd have such a lazy daughter-in-law. Nathan is working hard to become first class, and here you are, playing around like a parasite. Try to be more useful, she criticized almost daily, making it increasingly difficult for me to concentrate on my work. Desperate to change the situation, I decided to talk to my husband about it. "Oh, my mom's getting in the way of your work?" Nathan asked when I brought it up. "Yes, it's like she doesn't understand I'm working from home. She thinks I'm just goofing off," I explained. "I see. My mom has old-fashioned ideas, so it might be inevitable. I'll talk to her," he assured me. Nathan's support gave me some relief, but my mother-in-law was more stubborn than I had anticipated. "How did you convince Nathan? Why do I have to be scolded?" she fumed. "It's clear you're just playing around." "That's not it. I've been trying to explain," I protested, but our clashes only grew more frequent. Each time she made unreasonable remarks, I turned to Nathan for help. But over time, he seemed less willing to mediate. "This is a problem between the two of you. Solve it yourselves," he said one day. Just as I was beginning to feel I couldn't take it anymore, something unexpected happened. Feeling unwell, I went to the hospital, only to be shocked by the news. I was pregnant. My mother-in-law had often pressured me to provide a successor, but I never imagined getting pregnant at such a tumultuous time. I immediately informed my husband and in-laws about the pregnancy. The news took everyone by surprise, but my mother-in-law was especially stunned. "Well done," she said, clearly delighted. Both my husband and father-in-law were happy too, but my mother-in-law's joy was the most apparent. Since then, she had become much kinder to me. "Hazel, how are you feeling? I'll handle the household chores so you don't overdo it," she offered. Her sudden change in attitude was a relief. The scolding and bullying that had once been a daily occurrence stopped, and instead, she became supportive and caring about my health. It was comforting to have the previously confrontational mother-in-law offer me support during this challenging time. Despite the initial strain on my relationship with my husband, things began to improve, and our bond grew stronger. I settled into a stable condition as I prepared for childbirth. However, a new issue emerged during this time. Sometime after the news of my pregnancy, my mother-in-law asked, "By the way, can you tell the baby's gender yet?" "Yes, it's a girl," I replied honestly. Her face fell with disappointment. "A girl? It should have been a boy. Our restaurant has always been passed down to males. Women inheriting such businesses is unheard of." I tried to reason with her. "That's unacceptable. Nowadays, women can inherit businesses too." Her response was harsh. "Don't try to justify yourself with your strange values. You're clearly not suited for this." Although my father-in-law and husband were slightly disappointed that the baby wasn't a boy, they weren't as upset as my mother-in-law. However, her disapproval quickly turned into hostility. "Having no heir means you're worthless. How long are you going to stay in bed? Get up and do some housework," she demanded. "I'm sorry, but I've been really sick with morning sickness," I explained. "Don't be so spoiled. Pregnancy is not an illness. Get moving," she shouted as she came to wake me. Facing both poor health and harsh treatment, I decided to go against my in-laws' wishes and return to my parents' house for the birth. Spending time at my parents' home felt like a long-awaited relief. While I found great relief both mentally and physically during my time at my parents' home, it was clear that my stay with my in-laws had been a significant source of stress. After some time at my parents' place, my daughter was finally born. My husband and I had chosen the name Yi for her, and she was absolutely adorable. I made a firm promise to protect her with all my heart. Perhaps because the hospital where I gave birth was in my hometown, none of my in-laws visited. Not even once. I had hoped my husband would come, but he couldn't make it due to the restaurant's demands. After resting and regaining my health, I decided to return to my in-laws' home, but I quickly regretted it. My mother-in-law greeted me with an angry expression. "You've taken your sweet time bringing back my grandchild. Why the delay?" "I'm sorry. I needed some rest," I explained. "Rest? We've been incredibly busy." "What do you mean by busy?" she retorted. "The restaurant was featured in magazines and on TV, and we've been fully booked every day. I even had to help out there," I said. "I see. That's why I need you to come to the restaurant immediately," my mother-in-law demanded. Feeling overwhelmed, I saw no other option. My husband also urged me to help, explaining that the restaurant was in trouble. Reluctantly, I put my daughter in daycare and began assisting at my in-laws' restaurant. The real challenge started then. I had to work at the restaurant every day, manage all the household chores, and care for my child. My health was deteriorating, and on top of that, I was subjected to constant verbal abuse from my mother-in-law, which pushed me to my mental limits. Amidst all this, one day, I suddenly collapsed and was diagnosed with a stress-induced gastric ulcer. After regaining consciousness, I explained my situation to the doctor, who advised that I would need a longer hospital stay than usual. When I informed my mother-in-law, her response was devoid of concern. "What a troubled woman," she said dismissively over the phone. Meanwhile, my husband apologized, saying, "I'm sorry for pushing you too hard." But it felt too little, too late. I couldn't shake the feeling that he too was responsible for letting things spiral so badly. During my hospital stay, Rose, who worked at a small restaurant, came to my aid. "I'll take care of you," she said. "I'll handle the drop-offs and pickups for your daughter." "Thank you so much," I said, deeply relieved. Rose's help with daycare was a lifeline, allowing me to focus on my recovery with some peace of mind. However, a few weeks into my hospitalization, I received a frantic call from my husband. "Hazel, please calm down and listen. Yumi, she's died. She was caught in a big fire, and her body couldn't be saved." The words struck me like a blow, and I could barely process the news. "I'm sorry, but I'm also suffering," he said. The shocking news left me deeply unsettled. When I returned to my in-laws' home after being discharged, I was met with the grim sight of an urn containing my daughter's ashes. Overwhelmed with grief, I was further stunned by my husband's next statement. "I'm giving you this urn and asking for a divorce. I can't continue our marriage with the loss of our daughter and the ongoing issues with my mother. I understand if you're fed up with the situation." "I am," I said. "I'm done with your mother's bullying and your inability to protect me. I'll leave." Determined to move on, I decided to leave my in-laws' home and pursue a divorce. When I returned to my parents' house, their warm welcome provided a much-needed source of comfort in the depths of my sorrow. When I explained my situation to my company where I had been taking time off, they were understanding and allowed me to extend my leave. After a month of rest, I received an unexpected phone call. "Hello, is this Yumi's mother? This is a staff member from the nursery. Why are you calling?" I was initially puzzled and thought it might be a joke. But the voice on the other end was stern. "Could you please come and pick up Yumi? It's past the time we can keep her." Confused, I replied, "I'm sorry, but my daughter passed away a month ago." The teacher's tone shifted to anger. "Why would you say such a thing? It's unthinkable to neglect your own child. Please come quickly." Overwhelmed by their reaction, I rushed to the nursery. To my shock, I found Yumi there, alive and laughing joyously. The relief of seeing her safe was immense. A teacher approached me, clearly having realized the misunderstanding. "We were told by your mother-in-law that you were too busy to pick up Yumi, so she's been bringing her here daily." Hearing that my mother-in-law had falsely claimed Yumi was in my care while she was actually alive at the nursery filled me with rage. My contact information was listed as the emergency contact, which is why the nursery had called me. My husband and father-in-law had deceived me, and I was furious. Taking Yumi, I returned to my parents' home. As I settled in, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my mother-in-law. "Why did you take Yumi back without permission?" she yelled. I retorted, "Why did you lie about Yumi's death? I found out she was alive and left at the nursery. If you all want to lie to make things easier for yourselves, that ends now. I will raise my daughter myself. Do as you like, but don't contact me again." My mother-in-law was silent and then hung up. Fueled by anger, I resolved to uncover the full truth about the situation. I went to my in-laws' house armed with important documents. "What are you doing here?" my mother-in-law asked, visibly surprised. That day, the restaurant was closed and the whole family was at home, including another key person. "I've come to discuss the affair between Nathan and Rose," I said. The mention of the affair visibly shook my in-laws. "Affair? What are you talking about?" my ex-husband asked, his face paling. I presented documents proving that Rose was pregnant and that Nathan was the father. According to these, Rose was pregnant around the time I gave birth. While I was in the dark, you two were involved in an affair that led to this pregnancy. To cover it up, you lied to me about Yumi's death. Their faces turned even whiter as they absorbed my words. "I'm relieved that Yumi is safe, but I will be demanding compensation for my mental distress and child support," I declared. My ex-husband began to apologize profusely. "I'm truly sorry. It was wrong. This was all my mother's idea, and I was against it. We intended to put Yumi in a child welfare institution." "Child welfare institution? What are you talking about?" I demanded. He revealed a shocking truth. The plan had been to fake Yumi's death and place her in a child welfare institution to avoid paying compensation and child support. My anger reached its peak. "I'm truly sorry. Please, I beg you to overlook the compensation and child support," he pleaded. "There's no way I can forgive that. I'm going to sue you. Be prepared," I replied, and left the house. Following these events, I demanded compensation from Nathan and Rose and sought child support from my ex-husband. I also detailed the situation to neighbors, regular customers of the restaurant, and mothers from the nursery school. The scandal spread quickly, tarnishing my in-laws' reputation. As word spread on social media and even new customers who had heard about the restaurant through magazines stopped coming, the family's small restaurant was forced to close within a year. It felt like just deserts for their despicable actions. Meanwhile, I continued working from home at my parents' house, focusing on raising my daughter. She's growing up well, and both my parents and I are delighted to see her thrive. I plan to keep working hard for her future. He's retiring, so to celebrate, I'm taking our parents to France starting today. I'm borrowing your platinum card for the trip. We're going to enjoy ourselves using your credit card." "What a trip. What are you talking about?" "Exactly what I said." "No, I don't understand what you mean by exactly what I said. Please explain." "We need to hurry." "I understand. We'll leave soon." "Sorry, I have to go now. I'll hear the details when I get back. Just one thing though. The credit card won't work." "Huh? My jobless husband Parker took my credit card to take our parents on a trip. I've put up with a lot from Parker, but this seems like the perfect chance. I'm going to make sure Parker learns a lesson, and when he returns from the trip, he'll have some big regrets. I'm Lee, a 32-year-old employee at a major company. After graduating from a top university, I landed a great job and have been doing well. Even though I'm only 32, I make enough money to support Parker, who doesn't work, and a child, if we had one. But that's just a possibility. We've been married for 2 years and don't have kids yet, though we're thinking about it. Despite having a good job and income, I'm not happy with my newly life. The part about having a child is just an idea, but Parker not working is real. I'm not hungry for dinner because I had snacks. That's fine, but what about your job search? I didn't go for an interview today. I just stayed home looking at job websites. Parker quit his job a year ago and has been looking for work since then. Actually, he's been doing part-time jobs but doesn't keep them for long. He starts a job, quits shortly after, relaxes for a while, then looks for another part-time job. You're looking at part-time jobs again, aren't you? I'm looking at both full-time and part-time. Why don't you stop looking for part-time jobs and focus on finding a full-time position? I know, but there is a right time for everything. I wish Parker would find a steady job, but there's a reason he can't be pushed too hard. He quit his last job because of a conflict over work policies with his boss. That boss was notoriously difficult. Parker stood up to him as the office representative with his colleagues' support, but when the conflict escalated, his colleagues sided with the boss, not Parker. As a result, Parker lost his boss's approval, felt betrayed by his colleagues, and found it hard to stay, so he left the company. Parker, dinner's ready. Can you bring it here? After quitting his job, Parker became withdrawn, staying in his room. After about 2 weeks, he began to come out and help with household chores. I'll do the dishes. Really? Thanks. Then it's all yours. Yeah, I've got plenty of time. Parker joked, but his smile didn't seem genuine. Yet, another 2 weeks later, he started looking for a new job. I have an interview today. Is it your top choice? Yeah, I'm going to nail this one and make a fresh start. I'm rooting for you. Do your best. A month after quitting his job, Parker started looking for work more seriously. But even after another month, he couldn't find a job. Why do they keep rejecting me? It's all because of my last company. Don't lose heart. You'll find something good. Of course, I'm frustrated. I didn't do anything wrong. Parker may not be completely blameless, but what happened at his previous job wasn't entirely his fault either. However, quitting due to interpersonal issues doesn't impress potential employers. It feels like nothing I do is right anymore. That's not true. You have an interview tomorrow. Let's update your resume. It's pointless. I'm not going to that interview. Repeated rejections took a toll on Parker, and eventually he became defiant. One day, I returned home to find torn-up resumes scattered on the living room floor, knowing his interview hadn't gone well. Carefully choosing my words, I said, "Can you throw that trash in the bin? I'm done." Done with what? Job hunting. We can manage on Layla's income, right? I don't need to work. It was true, we could get by on my salary alone. Some people choose not to work and excel as full-time homemakers, but that wasn't Parker's situation. He seemed to be avoiding reality. Understanding his reluctance after his rough experience at his last job and the fruitless job search, I decided to be patient with him for a while. Parker, you still haven't found a job. What's your plan? I've worked hard in the past. This is just a long break. I'm not just sitting around, I'm preparing for the future. That's good to hear. Living near my in-laws, Parker's mom, Layla, and dad, Nicholas, started visiting us more after he quit his job. They were probably worried about him. When they heard Parker was preparing for his next job, they seemed relieved, but that was far from the truth. The beer's running out today. Can you grab some on your way home? It's running out again? You drink too much? Try to cut back a bit. Fine, I won't ask again. I'll get it myself. Parker wasn't studying or job hunting. He spent his days watching TV and drinking beer. He probably didn't want others to know he was unemployed. I decided not to tell my in-laws the truth to spare Parker's feelings, even though he hadn't looked for a job in over 3 months. Finally, I decided to bring it up. Parker, maybe it's time to start job hunting again. You seem more settled now. What? It's only been 6 months since my last job. You want me to work again after what happened? I just think the break has been quite long. Stop nagging. You can't understand my feelings when your job is going well. I have my own struggles, you know. Everyone faces work problems and relationship issues. We can work through this together. I understand. I'll start looking for a job, okay? Parker walked out during our conversation. My words seemed to have hurt him, but his agreement to job hunt felt like progress. I planned to apologize when he felt better. I got a job because you pushed me. That's great. Where? At a nearby supermarket. So you'll need to learn and work hard, right? It's just part-time. No need to work too hard. Part-time or not, any job is important. Do you have a problem with that? I wanted to say more to Parker, but I decided to see how even a small step like this could help him recover. I chose to wait and observe. I'm home. Parker, you're back. How's the job at the pub? I quit the supermarket part-time. Why? It hasn't been that long. A college student there was being bossy, always telling me to put the vegetable boxes at the bottom in storage. It felt like harassment. That student was probably just showing Parker how to do the job. In any workplace, even a college student might be more experienced. Parker kept finding and quitting jobs, unable to stick with any. So Parker hasn't been able to keep a job for long, and it's already been a year. Parker, what job are you doing now? I'm working part-time at a pub. I've never worked in food and beverage before, but it's interesting, and I think I finally found my calling. Really? That's great, but isn't the income from a part-time job in a restaurant kind of low? That's fine. I'm currently apprenticing, aiming to go independent. So, you plan to own your own place someday? Exactly. The income's small now, but I'm working hard towards my goal. Then take this. Treat yourself to something nice for once. Parker still puts on a good show in front of his parents, but as always, it's all lies. He quit the pub job 3 days after this conversation, deceiving everyone and even taking allowance from his parents. This time, I couldn't help but feel disappointed in my husband, so I decided to be firmer than before. Hey Parker. Later please, I'm at a good part in the movie. You can pause it. I grabbed the remote control from the table, paused the movie, and started a conversation. It's frustrating when you pause at the best part. What is it? Parker, you're 35 now, right? You know that's prime working age. Don't you think about the future? Spending all day at home, drinking, and just watching TV. The future? There are plenty of 35-year-olds not working. Many people enjoy life without a job. True, work isn't everything, but those people have something else they're dedicated to. Do you have something like that? Yeah. I know you're upset about me not working. I'll look for another part-time job. Parker seems set on only working part-time. Considering his reasons for leaving his job and his struggles with job hunting, I've been careful not to upset him. But it's time for Parker to get back on track. I need to be firmer. One day at work, I received a text from Parker. Dad's retiring, so we're going to France to celebrate starting today. I'm borrowing your platinum card. We're going to enjoy ourselves on your credit card. I panicked and called him immediately. What do you mean, a trip? Just what I said. I don't understand. Just what I said. Please explain. There are so many things wrong here. It's okay to celebrate Nicholas's retirement, but Parker should have talked to me before using my money and borrowing my credit card. More like taking without asking. And why am I paying for a trip to France that I'm not even going on? Parker probably told his parents he paid for it from his savings, my credit card. Just thinking about it makes me so angry, but one thing Parker said stands out. You mentioned borrowing a credit card. Do you mean the one from our house? Yeah, why? I do have a platinum card. Some people think you need a high income for it, but that's not true. Credit history, stable income, and other factors matter, and you can get one in your 30s. It has a high annual fee, but I use it for the benefits and points. However, that credit card is in my wallet. So you took the credit card from home? Yeah, so I'm counting on you for the payment. Parker, excited about his trip to France, spoke to me in a challenging tone. I've been patient with Parker for a long time, but now it seems like the right moment to take action. Parker thinks he's smart for taking my credit card and acting cheerful about it, but he's about to realize otherwise. What are you waiting for? We need to leave. Got it. Sorry, I have to go now. I'll hear the details when I get back. just one more thing. That credit card you took won't work. What? That can't be right. It's under Lila's name, and it expires this month. It's close, but it shouldn't be an issue. You're lying, right, Lila? You're lying to stop me from using the card, aren't you? That's such an obvious lie. Yes, it does expire this month. That's why I've already received a new credit card. What does that mean? So I have 2 credit cards to use now. Sometimes, when a new card is activated, the old one stops working. I've already started using the new card, so the one you took won't work. What? Are you kidding me? You think I'm lying. If you don't believe me, I can send you the URL to the credit card website, or you can just try using the card. It would be funny to see you try to pay with a card that doesn't work. This credit card really won't work. Hey, hurry up. I hear his parents calling him in the background, but Parker, realizing the credit card won't work, seems too flustered to respond to them. What should I do? I told them I pay for everything except the round-trip travel. Oh, they covered the flight? Yes, Dad felt bad about covering all the trip costs. What should I do? I'm about to take a cab, and I don't even have money for that. That's not my problem. You said you would pay for everything except the flight. Using my credit card in the first place was wrong. You should pay with your own money. How can I? I don't have any money right now, Parker. You haven't been taking work seriously. It's your fault for trying to impress, taking your parents on a trip without any money. I'm at work, so I have to hang up now. I just wanted to tell you about the credit card. Wait. I hung up and returned to work. Parker, unable to pay for even the cab, would have to come clean with his parents. That evening, after I finished work, I received a call from my Leila. I heard from Parker. He tried to use your credit card and lied about working. I'm sorry for the trouble. No, don't apologize, my Leila. I'm sorry for the inconvenience with the credit card. Are you okay with the money? We'll cover the cost of this trip when we return. I'll make sure Parker apologizes and starts looking for a job immediately. I'm sorry, my Leila, but I'm considering divorcing Parker. Divorce? Because of this? It's part of it, but Parker has been taking money from me for a while. What? I stopped giving Parker money to limit his drinking. He got a part-time job and started buying his own alcohol. But his part-time salary wouldn't cover daily drinking. Parker was taking money from my wallet to buy alcohol. He repeatedly took amounts ranging from $4 to $40. Over a year, the total became significant. I hadn't been tough on Parker, hoping he would change, but when he took my credit card for his trip, it wasn't just about $42 anymore. This increase in what he took made me believe he had no intention of changing. I understand. Should I inform Parker about the divorce? Could you just tell him I want a divorce? We'll discuss the rest when he gets home. About an hour later, the next morning after my conversation with my Leila, Parker called. He must have learned about the divorce from my Leila, though I had asked her to wait until he returned to discuss it. Feeling drained, I chose not to answer his call. When I returned home from work that evening, I found Parker already there. He had cut his trip short. I'll start working seriously now. Please don't leave me, he pleaded as soon as I entered the living room. Seeing Parker, he'd immediately apologized. His remorse seemed genuine, but it came too late. He had a whole year to change, yet he was asking for another chance now. Despite my repeated warnings, he had wasted every opportunity. I'm not going to give Parker another chance because he gave up on me. My decision is final. Can you leave? Please don't say that. If you won't leave, should I move out? Only if you can afford the rent here. Parker fell silent. He didn't even have the money for next month's rent, let alone any income. My words and the reality of the impending divorce seemed to sink in for him. With nothing to take, Parker appeared to leave the house, likely heading to his parents' place. I briefly considered asking if he had money for transportation, but Parker isn't a child. He should handle his own affairs. Sadly, I watched him go. After leaving our house, Parker went to his parents' home. Later, I received a call from my Leila. They allowed Parker to stay for one night, but asked him to leave the next day. They were concerned he might become too dependent on them if he stayed longer. It must have been tough for them as parents to make this decision, but they felt it was necessary for Parker's sake. Cast out by his parents, Parker returned to our house, pleading with me. Please help me. I've got nowhere to go and no money. That's the result of your own actions. You need to handle this yourself. Everyone faces difficulties, and while it's okay to seek help sometimes, all you've done in the past year is neglect your responsibilities and do as you please. I didn't allow Parker into the house and turned him away from the doorstep. The divorce eventually went through. Parker was hesitant, but with his parents' support, it happened faster than expected. I'm not sure what happened to Parker afterward, but he's likely still moving from job to job and making excuses. I thought I would feel lonely without Parker, but I didn't. His attitude had been stressful, and I was always careful not to upset him. No longer needing to accommodate him, I've been living more comfortably. Unconsciously, our life together was a burden. I'm relieved I didn't let myself get dragged down with him. Now, I can live without having to cater to anyone else.
My name is Clara, a 32-year-old woman who, once a firm believer in fairy tale endings, saw her life take an unexpected turn 3 years ago when I met Mark, the man who would eventually become my husband. Our story unfolds as a journey of love, trust, and eventual betrayal against the backdrop of what seemed like a perfect marriage. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning when fate led me to the Corner Cafe, a John Grisham novel in hand, lost in the world of legal thrillers. That's when Mark entered, immediately noticeable with an air of confidence and a warmth in his smile that felt inviting. "Hey, is that Grisham's latest?" he asked, nodding towards my book, his friendly voice tinged with genuine curiosity. "Yeah, just started it. He's always a good read," I responded, pleasantly surprised by the ease of our conversation. We delved into discussions about our favorite authors, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I grew closer. Our shared interests in music, particularly old jazz, and a mutual love for exploring hidden bookstores around the city cemented our bond. Mark was charming, respectful, and attentive, and each encounter felt like catching up with an old friend. One evening, as we walked along the river, Mark's tone turned serious. "Clara, I've never felt this way before. I think I'm falling for you," he confessed under the dim glow of the streetlights. His words sent a rush of warmth through me, and I admitted, "I feel the same, Mark. You're unlike anyone I've ever met." 6 months flew by, and our relationship only grew stronger. During a cozy dinner at my apartment, Mark proposed, and there was no hesitation in my yes. I loved him, and I believed in our future together. The joy of our engagement, however, was soon met with apprehension as the time came to meet Mark's parents. His mother, Linda, was a stern woman with piercing eyes that seemed to judge my every move, while his father was more amiable but carried an undeniable seriousness, especially regarding the institution of marriage. During a formal dinner at their house, Mark's father brought up the subject of a prenuptial agreement. "It's just practical," he stated matter-of-factly. The request caught me off guard, but given my past experience with a cheating ex-boyfriend, I understood the necessity. "I agree, but I have a condition," I said, steadying my voice. "If either of us cheats, the cheater owes the other $100,000. Mark's expression was a mix of surprise and respect. "I promise, Clara, I'd never cheat on you," he said earnestly. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, filled with laughter, dancing, and promises of forever. The first year of our marriage felt like living in a dream. We traveled to romantic destinations, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and supported each other's ambitions. Mark was not just my husband. He was my best friend and confidant. After the whirlwind of our wedding, Mark and I settled into married life with an ease that surprised even me. Our first year was like living in a bubble of happiness, untouched by the outside world. Our honeymoon in Paris was a dream, strolling along the Seine as two lovebirds lost in a city of love. "Can you believe we're here?" I inquired of Mark one evening as we observed the Eiffel Tower lighting up. He drew me close and responded, "With you, I can believe anything. This is just the start for us, Clara." Those days were filled with laughter, romantic dinners, and promises of a shared future. Returning home with a suitcase full of memories, our bond felt unbreakable. In our daily routine, Mark would bid me farewell each morning before work, and I'd have dinner waiting for him upon his return. Our conversations stretched late into the night, discussing everything and nothing. One night, while cleaning up after dinner, Mark remarked, "You know, I never thought I'd be this happy doing mundane stuff like washing dishes." I playfully splashed water at him, and he laughed, catching it in his hands. "That's because you've got an amazing wife. It's all about good company," he said. "Absolutely the best decision of my life marrying you." Despite the growing pressure from external expectations, particularly the anticipation of starting a family, our happiness persisted. Linda, Mark's mother, would drop not-so-subtle hints at family gatherings, asking, "So when are we going to hear some good news?" I brushed it off with a joke, but her persistence strained me over time. Mark reassured me, saying, "Don't let my mom get to you. We'll start a family when we're ready, not minutes sooner." Our first year of marriage was magical, celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. Mark surprised me with a necklace I had admired months ago. "Happy anniversary, Clara. Here's to many more years of happiness," he said, his eyes shining with love. As we cuddled on the couch that night, I felt incredibly fortunate. However, as our second year of marriage began, the pressure from Mark's family, particularly Linda, took a toll. It wasn't just about starting a family. Her criticisms infiltrated every aspect of our lives. Linda's disapproval, often hidden in seemingly helpful comments, turned every visit into a nightmare. One afternoon, as I set the table for lunch, Linda walked into the kitchen, eyeing the spread with a disapproving frown. "Is this what you're serving? A bit simple, don't you think?" she remarked, her tone dripping with disdain. Clenching my jaw, I tried to maintain composure. Her critiques extended beyond my cooking, finding fault in everything from house decorations to how I spent my free time. One evening, relaxing in the living room, Linda gave her unsolicited opinion, stating, "You know, Clara, if Mark gave me the money he spends on you." I contemplated hiring a proper cleaner and cook. Mark appeared uncomfortable, but he remained silent. His quiet response felt like a betrayal, and though seething with frustration, I managed to say, "Well, Linda, I'm doing my best here." The hurt intensified as Mark's attitude began to mirror his mother's criticisms, albeit in a more subtle manner. Following one of Linda's visits, Mark casually suggested, "Mom might have a point about the house. Maybe we should consider getting some help." A pang of hurt and frustration hit me, and I questioned, "So you think I can't handle it either?" He backpedaled, saying, "No, that's not what I meant." But the damage was done. Constant criticisms and Mark's growing detachment strained our marriage, leading to arguments over trivial matters and transforming our once easy conversations into tense exchanges. After a particularly heated argument, I found myself wondering aloud, "What happened to us, Mark? We used to be on the same team." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated, and replied, "I don't know, Clara. Everything feels so complicated now." That night, I went to bed feeling lonely and misunderstood. Linda's insidious comments had invaded not only our home, but also our marriage, making me question whether the love Mark and I shared could withstand this constant barrage of negativity. As the third year of our marriage unfolded, a sense of unease settled in my heart. The once bright flame of our love seemed to flicker under the shadow of doubt and distrust. It all started with repeated phone calls from a name that kept popping up on Mark's phone, Jake. Mark's demeanor changed whenever that name flashed on the screen. One evening, as we watched TV, his phone rang again, and I couldn't help but notice the nervous glance he threw my way. "Who's Jake?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart pounded. "Just a new guy at work, no one important," Mark replied, but his voice was too nonchalant, and his answer seemed rehearsed. Mark's behavior continued to shift. He started coming home late from work with flimsy and inconsistent excuses. His wardrobe underwent a transformation, shifting from casual to sharply tailored suits. One night, as he prepared to leave for another late night at work, I questioned, "Working late again?" Noticing his dressed-up appearance. "Yeah, big project," he said without meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." Frustration boiled over, and I confronted him one day, saying, "This isn't like you, Mark. What's really going on?" My voice trembled with a mixture of anger and fear. Mark sighed, displaying a mix of guilt and annoyance. "I told you, it's just work. Why can't you trust me?" I shot back, "Because you're hiding something. You're never here, and when you are, it's like you're a million miles away." Mark didn't respond. He just grabbed his coat and left, leaving me standing there feeling more alone than ever. That night, lying in our empty bed, I made a decision. I couldn't live in this limbo of doubt and suspicion. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. The next morning, I called a private detective. It felt like a betrayal, but the constant worry and uncertainty were eating me alive. I needed answers and was determined to get them, no matter what they revealed about the man I thought I knew. The days after contacting the private detective were a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I felt like I walked a tightrope, desperately trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, while my world quietly crumbled around me. Then the call came, shattering my last hope. "Mrs. Johnson, we have conclusive evidence. I'm afraid your suspicions were correct." The detective's voice was solemn, heavy with the weight of the news he was delivering. He explained that Mark had been having an affair, and the mysterious Jake on his phone was actually a woman. My heart sank as he detailed their meetings, providing timestamps and photos. It was irrefutable. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of devastation and vindication. My worst fears weren't just fears anymore. They were cold, hard facts. Despite the pain, I decided not to confront Mark immediately. I needed more than just the evidence of his infidelity. I needed to understand the full extent of his deceit. One evening, as I passed by his home office, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Mark was talking to his mother, Linda. "Mom, I'm planning to end it with Clara after your birthday." Mark's voice was cold, devoid of any affection he once had for me. "Oh, that's wise, dear. Make sure she gets me a nice 65th birthday present before you drop the bomb," Linda replied, her voice laced with a callousness that took my breath away. I leaned against the wall, feeling nauseous. Not only was my husband unfaithful, but he and his mother were plotting against me, waiting to use me for one last expensive gift before discarding me. Fueled by a mixture of anger and resolve, I decided to play along. I continued as if nothing was wrong while secretly gathering more evidence of Mark's infidelity. The detective provided me with everything: photos, videos, and even audio recordings. I was building my case, preparing for the moment I would strike back. As I lay in bed each night next to the man who had betrayed me, a plan began to form in my mind. I would wait until after Linda's birthday. I would give them the illusion of victory. Let them think they had outsmarted me. But when they least expected it, I would reveal everything and turn the tables. As Linda's 65th birthday approached, I put on a mask of ignorance, acting as though everything was normal. Inside, I was a cauldron of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to see my plan through. A few days before the birthday, Linda casually mentioned her upcoming celebration during a family dinner. "So, Clara, I'm expecting a grand 65th birthday. You must have planned something special for me," she said with a sly smile, clearly anticipating a lavish gift. Keeping my emotions in check, I replied with faint enthusiasm, "Of course, Linda. I've arranged a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. It'll be a night to remember." Her eyes lit up with glee, not realizing the trap I was setting. "How wonderful! I can't wait. Just a small family gathering, right?" she asked. "Yes, very intimate and exclusive. Just for close family," I confirmed, my words laced with hidden irony. Later that night, Mark approached me, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's quite a generous plan for Mom's birthday. Are you sure about this?" I looked at him, maintaining my composure. "Absolutely. It's a significant birthday, and I want to do something special for her." Mark seemed appeased, but I could tell he was puzzled by my willingness to indulge his mother. As the day of the dinner drew near, I managed the final arrangements meticulously, confirming the booking under Linda's name, double-checking the guest list, and ensuring everything was in place for the grand evening. Playing the role of the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, I concealed my true intentions beneath a facade, ready to expose the betrayal and deceit that had corroded our marriage. The night before the dinner, as I lay in bed, a twisted sense of satisfaction enveloped me. I was mere hours away from turning the tables on Mark and Linda. They believed they were using me for one last benefit before discarding me, unaware that I held the reins of the game. The evening of Linda's 65th birthday unfolded in a luxurious restaurant, every detail meticulously planned to reflect the grandeur of the occasion. While Linda reveled in the opulence, I played the part of the gracious daughter-in-law, masking my inner turmoil with a practiced smile. As the dinner drew to a close, the waiter presented the bill, a hefty $4,500. With a steady hand, I reached for my card, my heart pounding. After swiping the card, I glanced around the table, observing Linda's satisfied smirk and Mark's uneasy expression. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Clara. This is truly generous," Linda said, her voice dripping with insincerity. Seizing the moment, Mark leaned in with a mocking tone. "By the way, Clara, I want a divorce." His words struck me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see my pain. Linda chimed in sharply. "Well then, I guess you should leave. This is a family gathering after all." Without a word, I stood up and left the restaurant, my dignity intact despite the turmoil inside. As I walked away, I swiftly canceled the payment on my phone and blocked the shared account, ensuring Mark couldn't cover the cost either. Back at home, I packed my belongings quickly, the finality of my actions setting in. I was leaving this chapter of my life behind, stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. Soon, my phone erupted with calls. I answered, and Linda's voice, shrill with rage and panic, filled my ears. The payment didn't go through. The restaurant staff called the police. "What have you done?" Her words were a cacophony of anger and disbelief, but I remained silent, letting her tirade wash over me. This was their doing, their betrayal and manipulation coming back to haunt them. After hanging up, I looked around the empty house, once filled with dreams and love, now just a hollow shell. I took a deep breath, stepped out the door, and didn't look back. Their calls continued, desperate pleas for help that I no longer felt obliged to answer. I had closed that chapter of my life for good. In the end, they paid. Mark had to borrow from his parents, but I didn't care where the money came from. It was a small compensation for the betrayal, but more importantly, it was closure. Sitting in the lawyer's office, signing the last of the papers, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been painful, full of betrayal and heartache. But I had come out stronger, more resilient. Walking out into the sunlight, I felt like a free woman ready to start anew. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. After all the darkness, I finally felt like I was stepping into the light.
My husband has been cheating on me. He's been showering his mistress with designer goods, and what's worse, he's been using my credit card to pay for these extravagant purchases. For the sake of our son, I've endured his behavior up until now, but I've reached my breaking point. I can no longer tolerate this. I have to take action, and the person who came to my rescue was the last one I expected. My name is Flora, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married to Adam for 10 years, and our beloved son Dominic turned 8 this year. I'm living my dream as a novelist, a career I've always aspired to pursue. My mystery series has a strong following, allowing me to secure several monthly serials, and my standalone books are also doing well, keeping me busy every day. At the start of our marriage, my husband had a job, but he stopped working as soon as I began earning. For the last 2 or 3 years, he's mostly lounged around the house, occasionally going out to play pachinko. However, today he changed into a suit, which was out of character for him. Something seemed off. Why the suit? I boldly asked him. Adam, it's unusual to see you in a suit. Where are you going? I questioned. My husband seemed startled but quickly composed himself. I'm going to a job interview, he responded. For what position? I asked. Well, it's for a job, obviously. I thought it was time for me to start working again, he replied. Good luck, I said, trying to sound supportive. He left the house, and I genuinely believed he was attending a job interview. I thought maybe he was reconsidering his priorities now that our son is still young and our future needed to be secured. However, he didn't return home until 1 a.m. I was up late working on a deadline, and when he finally stumbled in, he reeked of alcohol and perfume. He passed out on the living room sofa with his smartphone still in his hand. It was unlocked, and out of sheer curiosity, I decided to take a look. What I saw on his phone shocked me. To cut to the chase, my husband was cheating on me, and his affair was with my best friend, Delphine. They had gone to a fancy restaurant with a stunning night view that very day. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It was too much to bear. How could Adam cheat on me with Delphine? Didn't Delphine have her own husband? I trusted them both. The unexpected reality brought tears to my eyes. I knew I shouldn't wake my husband, so I held back my sobs. Evidence, I needed evidence. For now, I sent the proof of the affair to my own phone and decided to think about what to do next. The next morning, I casually asked my husband, who seemed to be behaving as usual, "Hey Adam, about yesterday." "Yesterday?" he responded, seemingly puzzled. You mentioned you had an interview, but you got home pretty late. I was just curious about what happened." My husband looked away, clearly trying to come up with an excuse. "Actually, I ran into a friend after the interview and we went out for drinks." "A friend? Who?" I pressed. "Just some guy, Flora. Do I need to explain everything?" He replied defensively. "You're right," I conceded, knowing he was hiding the fact that he had met with Delphine. His evasiveness only confirmed his infidelity. 1 month after discovering my husband's affair, I was still grappling with the situation. I hadn't confronted him about the cheating yet, knowing it would create a rift in our relationship. If I were on my own, I would have shown him the evidence of his affair and immediately sought a divorce. However, I couldn't bear to separate him from our son, Dominic, who was only 8 years old. Despite his frequent outings, taking advantage of my focus on work, this gave me the perfect opportunity to collect evidence of his infidelity. While he was out, I searched his room and found several unfamiliar receipts. It seemed he had been purchasing women's designer items, but there was no sign of them in his room, and he certainly hadn't given me any. There was only one conclusion. Adam had been showering Delphine with luxury goods. But where was he getting the money for that? He's unemployed and living off my allowance. I give him a monthly allowance, but he likely doesn't have any savings left. Worried, I decided to follow him. During this time, I called my brother over to watch Dominic, without telling him about my husband's affair. I fibbed to my brother, saying, "Hey, sorry to bother you out of the blue." "It's no problem, but what's up? Why do you suddenly need me to watch Dominic?" "I just want to go shopping alone," I lied. "Shopping? You've never been one to shop in person. Don't you usually shop online?" "Normally, yes, but today I want to buy something that's only available in store. Can you watch Dominic for me?" "All right, but don't be gone too long. Dominic gets lonely," he agreed. "Thank you," I said, relieved. With my brother's help, I was able to set my plan in motion. I watched my husband walking arm in arm with my best friend Delphine. I knew what was happening, but seeing it with my own eyes was a painful shock. They were cheerfully entering a high-end designer store. Then I witnessed something outrageous. Is that my credit card? My husband was using my secondary credit card to pay the bill. I always kept my main card safely in my wallet, while the secondary card was left unattended in a drawer. My husband took the secondary card without my knowledge and used it to fund gifts for his mistress. Over the past few months, I've been making large purchases for work, such as monitors, keyboards, and even new furniture, causing the balance on the credit card to skyrocket. Both cards were linked to the same bank account, and with my busy schedule, I hadn't reviewed the details closely. This negligence came back to haunt me. Not only was he cheating on me, but he was also using my money freely. Any lingering affection I had for my husband had completely evaporated. Although I was partly to blame for not noticing sooner, I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. I took clear photos of the two of them together and went home, simmering with anger. For the next few days, I focused on plotting my revenge. I repeatedly checked his usual computer when he wasn't around, knowing he sensed his phone and computer, allowing me easy access to his communications with Delphine. Soon, I discovered that the two of them were planning a trip to Okinawa during the upcoming long weekend, a 4-day, 3-night getaway. This was my chance. I planned to execute my revenge during my husband's affair trip, but one obstacle remained: my son. Carrying out my plan without my son discovering his father's infidelity would be challenging. I decided to turn to my brother for help once more. "Hey bro, sorry to bother you again, but could you watch Dominic for me during the upcoming long weekend?" "You mean for all 4 days?" he asked, sounding taken aback. "I have something important to take care of." His question made me uneasy. Before I could respond, he spoke firmly. "Flora, stop trying to handle everything alone. Adam's cheating on you, isn't he?" I was taken aback. "How did you know?" "I heard it from Dominic," he said. "Dominic?" I repeated in surprise. Even though my son was young, he had picked up on his father's infidelity. I don't know if he fully understood what was happening, but he sensed his father growing close to someone other than me, and it was causing me pain. Dominic, in his innocent way, had observed the situation. "I thought I was shielding Dominic from this," I murmured. "It seems Adam's actions have affected you so deeply that even Dominic could sense it. Are you still considering staying with someone like that?" "But if I divorce Adam, Dominic will be upset," I started to say. But then Dominic, who had been in the next room, suddenly appeared. "Mom, it's okay. I'm on your side." "Dominic, are you sure?" I asked, moved by his words. "I don't need someone who makes Mom sad." "As long as I have you, I'm okay," he said resolutely. "Thank you, Dominic, and thank you too, bro," I said, grateful for their support. With the help of my son and brother, I made up my mind to take action against my husband without any hesitation. We began moving to a new home on the day my husband was set to leave for his trip with his mistress. My brother helped us, and we discreetly packed our belongings whenever my husband was away. The night before the long weekend, I decided to confront my husband and give him one last chance. He was visibly excited about his trip the next day, and I went straight to the point. "Adam, what's with the suitcase? Why are you packing?" He replied, "Oh, this? I'm going on a trip with a friend starting tomorrow." "A trip? Did you mention anything about that? It's a last-minute decision, isn't it? You're using the allowance I give you," I questioned. My husband seemed annoyed and tried to brush off my questions. "Don't talk to me about it anymore, Aura." I couldn't care less about his excuses. I lowered my voice as I asked, "Are you really going on this trip with a friend?" My husband flinched at my tone, his shoulders tensing, but he still attempted to lie. "Of course, you've been nagging me a lot." "I see, a trip with a friend. Have a good time," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I could be fun regardless of whether he told me to be. "Just don't overdo it," I said as I left my husband's room. To be honest, if he had come clean with me then, I was considering settling matters amicably, requesting alimony and child support, despite his infidelity. After all, there was a time when I loved him. When my novels weren't selling well, he supported me and kept me going. I didn't want to harbor hatred or resentment toward him. However, after everything he's done, I can't afford to remain calm. For the sake of my son and my future, I need to end my relationship with him. There's no point in holding back any longer for a man who continually lies. The following morning, my husband had already left for his trip. I opened the drawer and confirmed that he had taken my credit card as usual. I immediately contacted the credit card company, reported the card as lost, and requested an immediate block on its use. My son woke up and I greeted him, "Good morning." He responded with a beaming smile. "Mom, today's the day, right?" "Huh?" I asked. "We're moving to our new home today, right?" he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Seeing his enthusiasm erase any lingering anxiety. "That's right, Monique. I've canceled the credit card, and now it's time to move." "Yeah, I'm excited for our new home," he said. Thanks to my brother's help, the move went smoothly. My son and I settled into our new home, while my husband's belongings were sent to a designated location. The next day, we were all relaxing at the new house with my son and brother. I got a call from my husband. "Hello? Flora, is that you? Could you transfer me some money? I've spent more than I planned, and now I need some extra cash." He likely couldn't use the card since I had frozen it, so he was asking me for money without directly mentioning the card. His request disgusted me. "Didn't you say you were going to stick to your allowance?" I asked. "Come on, don't say that. I can't enjoy my trip alone if you do that," he whined. "Alone? Don't you mean with Delphin?" I shot back. My husband seemed taken aback. "What are you talking about? Who's Delphin? What's going on with the card? It's pointless to play dumb. You're all over the place. Your lies aren't working," I snapped. "It's clear you've been cheating on me with my best friend Delphin. Did you really think you wouldn't get caught?" "This is what it looks like. It's not cheating," he tried to justify himself. My anger flared at his attempts to make excuses, oblivious to the presence of my brother and son. I didn't hold back, letting my fury loose on him. I had been holding in my anger for too long. "Stop making excuses. You have a family, yet you chose to have an affair with another woman and misuse someone else's credit card. Do you realize how low you've sunk?" "Flora, let's calm down," my husband tried to say. "Calm down? How can I stay calm when I'm talking to the person I despise most in the world? Let me make this clear. I have no intention of forgiving you or offering any help. You and the woman you cheated with can go straight to hell. Don't you dare show your face in front of me or Dominic ever again." I hung up the phone abruptly, cutting him off. Shortly after, Delphine, the woman he cheated with, called me. "Flora, what are you doing?" she demanded. "Delphine, long time no see. How's your trip with your best friend's husband going?" I retorted. "Shut up. Explain yourself." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. You sent Adam's belongings to my house, didn't you?" "Yes, during our move, I had shipped my husband's things to Delphine's house, knowing she was the one he had the affair with. Since Delphine was married, her husband was naturally at home. I had done it on purpose, sending all of Adam's belongings to her husband along with a detailed letter explaining the situation. As I shouted at Delphine over the phone, nearly breaking the speaker, I expressed my anger. "Are you serious? My husband found out, and Isn't that expected? You're having an affair even though you're married. My supposed best friend did such a disgraceful thing. You're the worst. I'm incredibly disappointed in you." "Excuse me?" she responded, taken aback. "I think that's my line," I retorted. "You were the one having an affair with my husband. Do you think I forgive you for that? Who showed disrespect first?" "Flora, I wasn't serious. It was just a fling. There's no way I'd settle for a jobless loser like him. Whether you were serious or not doesn't matter to me. I'm divorcing him soon. Your affair is a fact, and I won't forgive you. I'll be demanding the maximum compensation from you, so be ready." "Compensation? What? I didn't agree to that. Why should I pay compensation? It's natural. You did something that warrants it." "Wait, I'm a housewife. I can't afford to pay compensation." "I don't care. That's for you to figure out. Maybe you can beg your husband for help, though that doesn't seem likely." "Wait a minute, Flora, please," she started to plead. But I cut her off. "Goodbye." I hung up on her and blocked her contact. I finalized my divorce through a lawyer and demanded compensation from both my ex-husband and Delphine. I claimed child support and the money he had spent on the credit card without my consent. Delphine, saddled with debt from the compensation payments, was served divorce papers by her husband and reportedly kicked out of their home. She tried relying on her family but was turned away. As a result, she's now working night shifts and struggling to make ends meet. My ex-husband attempted to lean on Delphine, but she blamed him for causing her divorce. Their relationship quickly disintegrated, and they went their separate ways. As for my ex-husband, he's now juggling several part-time jobs just to get by day to day. Having been unemployed for so long, finding a stable job won't be easy. If he ever falls behind on compensation or child support payments, I won't hesitate to take action to collect what's owed. Meanwhile, my son and I are thriving in our new home. He's growing up fast, and each day is full of new experiences. I aim to continue showering him with love and shield him from any sadness.
Oh, isn't this exquisite? It's not just lovely. It's a pink diamond, and it comes with a price tag of $50,000. My mother-in-law, who couldn't be bothered to attend my own mother's funeral, appears to be relishing a lavish getaway with her friends, completely oblivious to my presence. She gleefully shared details about her new sparkling pink diamond ring, seemingly fueled by jealousy towards a friend who flaunted a similar ring. In her triumph, she revels in having outdone her friend by choosing a more expensive ring from the same store. However, the reality is far from what it seems. It's implausible for her to afford such a costly item. And it turns out she had secretly taken money from my husband's safe to make the purchase. This money, crucial for her future, had been earmarked for her nursing home fees. My name is Hillary Johnson, a 46-year-old woman living with my husband Steve, who is 7 years my senior, and our high school senior daughter Gina. Despite not being wealthy, we lead a stable life. I have worked part-time at a local drugstore for over a decade, and my hobby is cultivating herbs. Lately, I've been challenging myself with a medical herb certification exam. Gina and I often discuss her future dreams, bringing us joy. 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, introducing significant changes to our modest lifestyle. According to his will, the house went to Steve, and the cash to my mother-in-law. The money was intended for her nursing home fees, given her age of 75. Despite this, she pleaded tearfully to live in the house, and after much debate, we agreed to cohabitate for a year while searching for a suitable home. The area where the family home is situated has now become a popular high-end residential area. Still, we are not wealthy. It's an old land holding. I learned that my mother-in-law had a habit of spending recklessly, and though I had prepared for it to some extent, the reality was shocking. As Steve heads out for dinner shopping, my mother-in-law, on the first day of our cohabitation, casually asks, "Hillary, could you lend me some money? I'm going out." "Thank you. Just in case something comes up, and I need more, give me $100 for now," she says under the pretext of buying dinner. I found myself pondering how much groceries she intended to purchase. Despite my reservations, I made the mistake of giving her the requested amount. 2 hours later, she returned by taxi, laden with bags from an upscale department store filled with expensive deli items and sweets. Tonight, we feast. I wanted to try these side dishes. They're supposed to be delicious, and we have desserts too, she exclaimed proudly. Curious, I asked, "Mother, how much did this cost?" She replied, "Well, let's see. I went a bit over because of the taxi, but I covered the extra, so it's fine." Her proud declaration left me speechless, but little did I know this was just the beginning. Managing finances became my biggest headache after moving to the family home. While my father-in-law was alive, we used online supermarkets for groceries, paying with his card. Learning from my initial mistake of giving her large sums of money, I no longer entrusted her with shopping and kept the wallet in a locked drawer. Unhappy with not receiving money, she stopped doing any housework, caring only for the flowers at the entrance. Despite our monthly allowance of $300, she squandered it on clothes, beauty salons, meals, or coffee with neighbors. By mid-month, she would usually run out of money and ask for more. Frustrated by her reckless spending, as I was saving for my daughter's education, I calmly admonished her when she requested more money for a lunch date with friends. Even Steve, who works, gets an allowance of $300. I can't give you more than someone who's working, so please use it more wisely. Dissatisfied, she returned to her room, likely to ask Steve for money later. The allowance came from the nursing home fund, and if it diminished, it would be her who suffered. When Steve came home, I expressed my concerns. "Did your mother ask you for more allowance again?" He replied, "Yes, she did. But I can't be too hard on her. She must be lonely without Dad. She's always been vain, you know. But I want to fulfill her wishes for at least this year that she's here." "I understand, but your kindness isn't truly benefiting her. Besides, it will eventually have repercussions for us." "You're right. I get it. My mother-in-law had a tendency to flaunt, especially in front of her 3 old friends who were mothers of my husband's classmates living in the neighborhood. I became aware of this during the funeral arrangements for my father-in-law. "Steve, it's your father's funeral, so arrange the altar this way and get more extravagant flowers. The neighbors are coming. Don't embarrass your father," she instructed. Steve, being the spouse, complied with her demands to some extent, but the costs were significantly high. My mother-in-law's primary aim was to show off to the neighbors. I even felt sympathy for her, having to keep up with people from a different lifestyle. During the funeral, she only greeted 3 families of her friends. One day, after having lunch with her friends, she came back excited, her eyes sparkling. Today, Debbie showed me a ring worth $20,000 that she got from her husband for their golden wedding anniversary. "I've never seen a $20,000 ring before. That's a wonderful gift. You don't have such wealthy friends, do you, Hillary? You'll probably never see anything like that in your life," she remarked with superiority and sarcasm, using her friends to boast. "Hillary, you're so plain. Why don't you put on some makeup? Have you ever been to an upscale lunch?" It was all about one-upping me. I tried to ignore her words, but she seemed increasingly hostile towards me, especially after I refused to give her more money. After settling my father-in-law's affairs and starting to look for a nursing home, my mother's health took a turn for the worse. When my sister and I rushed to the hospital, the doctor informed us that she had about 3 months to live due to advanced cancer. She was in a fragile state and could deteriorate at any time. My mother had occasionally mentioned feeling unwell before, but being a person of great endurance, it wasn't easy for her to show any signs of weakness. I regretted not paying more attention to her. I asked my sister to stay with her while I went to fetch some clothes and valuables from her apartment. As I packed a large bag in her room, I found some cash, likely her living expenses for the month, in a drawer. I took the cash with me, planning to shower and head back to the hospital. I left the bag in Steve's upstairs room and, after getting ready, noticed the zipper slightly open. A sense of unease washed over me as I checked the bag and found the cash missing. Suppressing my rising anger, I went downstairs to my mother-in-law's room. "Mother, may I ask you something?" I inquired as she prepared to leave. Turning around, she asked, "How's your mother doing? I have plans with my friends right now." I confronted her. "The money that was in the bag in our room, you have it, don't you? That money belongs to my mother. Please return it." "I don't know what you're talking about. I never go upstairs." "Are you accusing me of stealing?" she retorted, rushing past me and heading for the door. "I'm going out for a fancy Chinese dinner with my friends tonight, so I don't need your poor excuse for a meal. Give my regards to your mother." With a smirk on her face, she left the house, leaving me in shock. Just then, Jenna came home and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" "Your grandmother's money. My mother-in-law took it." Unable to confront her without evidence, tears naturally started to fall from my eyes. Jenna gently stroked my back to calm me down. "That's terrible. It must have been her. I've seen her coming down from upstairs before. To think she would stoop to taking your grandmother's money. I can't forgive her. But how's Grandma? If you're going to the hospital, I'll come with you. Let's think of a way to get back at her." As we walked, Jenna's words encouraged me, lightening my heart a bit. Despite feeling sorry for my father-in-law, I decided to protect my family in my own way. A few days later, my mother's condition suddenly worsened, and she passed away. In her final days, she was mostly in a daze, occasionally lucid. I expressed my gratitude to her repeatedly for raising me, for her love, for Gina's future dreams, for the plans with Steve, and for our old age. She didn't speak, but her eyes smiled gently and sometimes nodded. While talking to her, I remembered a visit to my father-in-law before his death. He had thought about divorcing my mother-in-law, but didn't want to trouble his son and his wife. He asked me to sell the house and put my mother-in-law in a nursing home after his death. That's when he told me about her spending habits. Her attitude changed when Steve started kindergarten, living in a wealthy area, feeling pressure to keep up with rich neighbors. She deluded herself into thinking she was wealthy too, possibly fueled by Steve's success in a famous company. I regretted not putting her in a nursing home sooner. It could have prevented the theft of my mother's money. Steve and Gina arrived in time for my mother's final moments, but only my sister and her husband were there at the end. When we returned home to prepare for the funeral, my mother-in-law was out. I decided to show her the last bit of kindness. We held a small funeral for my mother without her presence. I tried calling her, but she was out and never answered. When I returned home after the funeral, everything was quiet as if she had stayed out overnight. Then, my mother-in-law returned in a good mood. "My condolences for your loss. It must have been hard," she greeted me. I noticed a shiny new jewel in her hand that I had never seen before. "Oh, this look, isn't it beautiful?" "A pink diamond. It cost $50,000. How did you get that, Mother?" I asked. She replied, "I bought it, of course." Debbie introduced me to the store. It's a reservation-only place in New York City, so I went for an overnight stay with my friends. The hotel we stayed at, and the meals were wonderful. To my astonishment, my mother-in-law indulged in luxuries during my mother's funeral, enjoying an overnight trip to New York with friends. I was left speechless with disbelief. I bought something even more expensive than what Debbie showed me. "Feels good, Mother," my mother-in-law declared. I couldn't comprehend how she obtained such an expensive item. "You don't have that kind of money. How did you get it?" I questioned. Nonchalantly, she replied, "Oh, I found it in Steve's room safe." My passbook was in there with exactly $50,000. Since it's in my passbook, it's my money, right? I felt frozen and disappointed by her actions during my mother's funeral, although, in all honesty, her behavior was somewhat expected. It was confirmed that she had entered our room upstairs. The passbook was in the safe of the study room that Steve now uses. The safe was an old dial type, and Steve, finding it tedious to turn the dial, left it unlocked, thinking the study was locked anyway. On the day my mother passed away, I intentionally left the study unlocked, suspecting that she might take the opportunity to enter our room and take the passbook from the safe. That $50,000 is from my father's inheritance. "Do you understand what that means?" I asked her. Unperturbed, she replied, "I know it's my money left by your father. So what's wrong with using it?" I began to feel pity for my mother-in-law. "Sure, it's your money and you're free to use it. But that was meant for your old age. We'll be moving out, so please manage on your own from now on." At first, my mother-in-law looked confused, but she slowly turned pale as she understood my words. "Wait, isn't there a separate fund for the nursing home? It's more than this amount, right?" she inquired. I explained, yes, there was more, but it decreased due to the inflated funeral costs of my father-in-law and your monthly requests for more allowance from Steve. Feeling the need to illustrate the alternatives, I handed her brochures of lovely nursing homes I had collected over several months. She looked at them speechless and shaking. At that moment, Steve and Gina came down from upstairs. I had reported to them after opening the study, so they had come to check. Steve, initially skeptical that his mother had stolen the money, had no complaints about what I did. While I would have properly arranged for my mother-in-law's nursing home if nothing had happened, her intrusion into our room and the theft of the money prompted me to protect my family. I had made it clear that entering our room and touching the money was unacceptable. I decided to sever ties with her for life. "Steve, you'll stay in this house, right? It's sad to sell a house filled with memories, but taking care of parents is a son's duty." I desperately clung to Steve. Checking the safe, I realized she had taken more than the passbook, the cash I withdrew for the car inspection too. "That's too much. I trusted you, Steve," I said, shocked by her actions. Struggling to speak, Steve admitted, "Oh, I have it. Just borrowed a bit. It was $11,000. But that wasn't all." "What about Hillary's mother's money?" I demanded. Panicking, she replied, "Oh, I'll return that too." "Then it's fine, right, Hillary? You'll forgive me now, won't you?" She hastily handed me the money, possibly pretending about the $50,000 ring. Until the end, there were no words of apology about my mother's money. "I'm sorry, but I can't live with you anymore. I'll protect my own family from now on," I declared. She broke down crying, clinging to Steve till the end. However, Steve's grief-stricken anger was intense, and he acted quickly. He sold her belongings to create a lump sum and found a nursing home affordable on her pension. The chosen home, though, was far from the family home. I probably won't see her again in my lifetime. Steve occasionally gets calls from the home, and she seems calmer now, possibly settling into her new environment. I regretted not placing her in a home earlier. Perhaps if we hadn't lived in that house, her life might have been happier. A part of me felt a little sympathy for her. After she left, we moved, waiting for Jenna's graduation. Jenna got into her desired university and started living on her own. The family home, being in a popular area, quickly found a buyer. Steve is now applying for a transfer to a branch near the sea. We plan to spend a few years until retirement there, searching for our final home. We hope to continue living peacefully and harmoniously as a family.
The police suddenly said, "We've quickly taken a child found in the car to the hospital. You're under arrest." I was shocked when they showed up at my house and couldn't believe what they were saying. "What? I don't have a child," I replied, confused. The officer looked confused too. They said they found the car's owner through the license plate and it was registered in my name. Could this be true? I had a feeling, so I rushed to the hospital where the child was taken. There, I saw a boy about 5 years old lying on an emergency bed. His face was red and rough, but my heart raced when I saw his familiar face. From that moment, my life changed completely with this child at the center. I am Emily, a 33-year-old who works from home. I started dating my husband, Michael, when we were in college together in the same club, and we got married after graduation. We've been married for 10 years but couldn't have children. We even tried fertility treatments, but I found out I had a condition that made it hard to conceive. Michael, being kind-hearted, told me, "It's okay. Let's live happily, just the two of us." My in-laws are nice, and since my brother-in-law already had a child, they never pressured me. But I felt bad for my parents, who were hoping for grandchildren. I live near them and visit often. If only my brother John had a child. I have a younger brother, John, who is 7 years younger than me. Maybe because he was the youngest, he started hanging out with bad influences in middle school. He says it's because our parents compared him to me, the smarter and more accomplished older sister. But from my perspective, our parents treated us equally. Still, John rebelled and caused a lot of trouble. At 20, he said he was cutting ties with the family and left home, disappearing without a trace. I haven't seen him since then. Sometimes I look through old photo albums and remember the days when John, as a toddler, would follow me around, calling me sis. One day, while I was working from home, my doorbell rang nonstop. I panicked and checked the camera, seeing the police at my door. They suddenly announced, "We've transported a child found in a car. You're under arrest." I was shocked and speechless. "What? I don't have a child," I said. The officer looked just as confused. I had so many questions. The police explained that a passerby had noticed a car abandoned on the road with a limp child inside and reported it. The child was taken by ambulance to the emergency room. When I asked where the car was, they said it was in front of my parents' house. Unfortunately, my parents were away on a trip. The police identified the car's owner from the license plate. While the car was registered in my name, the person using it was my younger brother, John. I used to lend my car to John when he got his license, and he took it when he left home. Since then, the car has been left in front of my parents' house only when it needed inspection and maintenance. Despite scolding him, my parents felt sorry for John and took care of the car, thinking he might need it. But who was the child left behind in the car? Hurrying to the hospital, I approached the bed in the emergency room and saw just the top of a small head peeking out from a blanket. The curly, wavy hair instantly reminded me of someone. My heart raced as a childhood memory of John flashed before my eyes. Getting closer, I saw the face of a boy around 4 to 5 years old who looked strikingly like John. Could it be? Just then, I received a phone call from my mother, who was away and sounded panicked. John called and asked me to take care of his child. He said he left the child in the car because we were not home. Under this blazing sun, what should we do? I reassured my worried mother that the child had already been taken to the hospital and seemed likely to survive. She sounded relieved and said she would be back soon. I understood my mother's feelings. There was no time for a trip now. I knew this child was my brother's. But when was he born, and who is his mother? I explained to the police that he was probably my brother's child and decided to stay with the boy. After that, I tried calling my brother several times, but couldn't reach him. Looking at the child, he seemed to be in pain. Seeing such a small body enduring so much hurt broke my heart. At that moment, a nurse came and handed me the clothes the child had been wearing before changing into hospital pajamas. They were worn out and very dirty, with the name Tom written on the tag. From his extreme thinness and the state of his clothes, it was clear that Tom had been living in a very tough situation. That evening, my mother returned from her trip and rushed to the hospital. "John," she murmured, holding Tom tightly with tears in her eyes. Tom looked a lot like John. By the next day, Tom's condition had improved, but he seemed very scared. I gently asked him, trying not to scare him, "How old are you, Tom?" "I'm 5 years old," he replied, holding out one hand and counting his fingers. "Wow, you speak so clearly." I praised him and stroked his head, and he smiled for the first time. Still, Tom seemed thin, pale, and small. The doctor said he had bruises all over his body. I convinced the police to let us take care of Tom until we could reach John, and somehow managed to avoid filing an official report. 3 days later, Tom was ready to leave the hospital. I didn't want him wearing his old, ragged clothes, so I bought him new ones and dressed him in them. He looked even smarter and cuter in his fresh outfit. As we were leaving the hospital, I finally managed to get through to John on the phone, but there was a lot of noise on the other end. "How could you leave him in the car under the blazing sun? He ended up in the hospital," I shouted in frustration. "He survived, didn't he?" "So it's fine," John replied casually. "He had bruises all over his body." "Did you do this?" I demanded. "Thomas is clumsy. I was just teaching him discipline," John retorted, showing no remorse. I was speechless. He's only 5 years old. He's struggling. He can't even remember his letters no matter how many times I try to teach him. It's frustrating, so I left him at our parents' house. I was shocked by my brother's harsh words about his own son. Considering it might be best for Tom not to be with such a parent, I was even more appalled when John added, "I'm in the middle of a casino jackpot right now," and abruptly hung up the phone. Seeing Tom, who looked visibly worried, begin to silently shed tears, I gently said, "It's going to be okay," and comforted him by stroking his head. At 5 years old, it's natural to feel scared and cry, but he didn't seem to be asking for his dad or mom, which struck me as unusual. I couldn't help but wonder why, and it pained my heart. After discussing with Michael and my parents, we decided that Tom would stay with us at our home. At home, I prepared a kid-friendly lunch with hamburgers and fries, adorned with colorful character flags. When I set the plate in front of Tom, his eyes lit up. "I've never seen food like this before. Can I really eat it?" he asked. "Of course, Tom. I made it just for you," I assured him. I loved watching him eat, with ketchup all over his mouth and a big, crunchy smile. In the evening, Tom had a blast playing in the bath with Michael, laughing and having a great time. At bedtime, I'd read him picture books while lying next to him. He listened attentively with sparkling eyes, but sometimes he'd look at me with a worried look. "Can I stay here forever? I don't want to go back home anymore," he pleaded one night. "I understand. You want to stay here with us, right?" I asked gently. Tom nodded with relief, and it broke my heart to see him feeling that way. As the days passed, he grew even closer to me and Michael. He'd offer to help fold laundry or try to carry my shopping bags with his little body when we went out. Living together, I discovered what a kind and wonderful child Tom was. Michael and I grew very attached to him, and we began discussing the possibility of adopting him, especially if John and his partner weren't planning to raise him. When I checked with the city office, I learned that my brother and his wife had registered Tom's birth, and according to their address records, they were living with Tom at our parents' house. We started the process of consulting with family court about adoption. About a month after Tom came to live with us, John and a young woman came to visit. "Hey, thanks for taking care of Tom, lol," John said casually. "I don't want to go back," Tom whispered, quickly hiding behind me. He must have had some frightening experiences. It had been years since I'd seen my brother, and he looked more confrontational than ever, with disheveled clothes. The young woman with him, who introduced herself as Riza, had multiple piercings in her ears and nose and dressed flamboyantly. "How did you find out where I live?" I asked, puzzled. "Mom told me." "By the way, sis, you're living in a nice house and having a great life, huh?" "I have something to discuss about Tom." "Let me in," John said. I felt uneasy, but I couldn't refuse when it was about Tom. According to my brother, he had married this woman shortly after leaving home. They had been moving around a lot, and there were times when they lived in their car because they had nowhere else to go. While he looked around my house, my brother suddenly got to the point. "I heard from Mom that you don't have any children, right? You've been married for 10 years with no kids, so maybe you can't have any," he said. "What are you trying to say?" I asked, feeling a sense of foreboding. "We have a great idea. If you want Tom, how about it? But it won't be for free," he said bluntly. I was shocked by John's audacity, trying to sell his own son for money after previously trying to leave him with our parents out of annoyance. I was filled with anger. "John, do you realize what you're saying? Tom is not some object to be sold." "What?" Acting all righteous now. "I rebelled because of your seriousness. Our parents always favored you," John sneered. "It's ridiculous to blame our parents and me for your own choices." "Shut up. Just give me the money," John demanded, raising his hand as if to strike me. In that moment, Tom, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward. He stretched out his arms, trying to shield me from John. Seeing this, I felt even more determined to protect Tom. "John, selling your own child for money is absolutely wrong," I stated firmly. Despite my initial outrage, I decided to give them the $13,400 I had saved in my dresser as a settlement. I also had them sign an agreement that they would have no further involvement with Tom and obtained their consent for the adoption. John's wife callously remarked, "It's a relief not to have to deal with such a troublesome child," shocking me with her indifference. Once the paperwork was finalized, they took the money, smirked, and vanished. From that moment on, Tom truly became our son, and we completed all the necessary legal procedures. The days that followed were filled with happiness. Tom thrived and grew healthy, and as a couple, we found our lives enriched with smiles and joy thanks to him. During this time, we began to notice Tom's talents and were eager to nurture them. However, 15 years later, another incident unfolded when my younger brother and his wife paid us a visit. John now sported a scruffy beard, messy hair, and looked much older than his 41 years. His wife appeared disheveled, with no makeup, wearing dirty clothes and torn plastic sandals. It was clear they were going through tough times and living a rough life. I had a sinking feeling because their visit couldn't bring anything positive, and unfortunately, my dependable husband Michael was at work that day. "What brings you here?" I asked cautiously. "I need some money," John replied bluntly. "Why should I give you any money?" I countered, feeling uneasy. "I'm surprised. I thought Tom was just a dumb kid, but he got into a top medical school, didn't he?" John said, revealing he had heard about Tom through someone in our neighborhood at a local tavern. In reality, Tom was very bright. He had excelled in school since elementary years and earned admission to a prestigious medical program right after high school. "That's no longer your concern," I said firmly. "It's a big deal. He's my son. And since he turns out to be such a great kid, I thought I'd take him back," John stated. "What?" I exclaimed, shocked by his audacity. "If you don't like it, how about you give me $33,500, John suggested. "Didn't I already give you $13,400 15 years ago?" I countered. "That's a different situation," John insisted. "I can't give you that much money," I firmly refused. John grabbed my collar and threatened me, asking if I wanted to get hurt. It hurt more emotionally than physically, seeing my brother act this way. Just then, someone shouted, "Stop it," and grabbed John's arm. It was Tom, now a strong 20-year-old. Tom easily subdued John, who ended up lying face down on the floor. My brother's wife, seeing Tom all grown up, said warmly, "You've grown so much. I'm your mom. I've wanted to see you." But Tom stood firm, declaring, "My only parents are the mom and dad of this house. I remember the terrible things you did to me when I was just 5. I felt love for the first time when I came here. You are not my parents." Even after Tom's heartfelt words, John and his wife didn't seem ready to give up. So I showed them the agreement we had made 15 years ago. It clearly stated, "We will have no future involvement with the child. If we fail to comply, legal action will be taken. You've broken your promise." "I'm calling the police," I stated firmly. They looked visibly shaken, trying to make excuses that they had forgotten about the agreement. In reality, we're being chased by debt collectors. Without $33,500, we're in serious trouble. Please don't be so heartless. Help me out, sis. You're well off, right?" John pleaded. Despite his earlier threats, now he was begging. "I can't help you. The moment you abandoned Tom, you lost any connection with me as well. You're no longer my brother," I said firmly. "Please," John begged, desperate and defeated. I firmly rejected John's pleas. Helping him would only enable his behavior to persist. As their insistence continued, I was on the verge of calling the police when they reluctantly left. Later, I learned that the couple had been arrested for shoplifting and were now leading a troubled life in jail. Meanwhile, Michael, Tom, and I continued to live peacefully and happily. Seeing Tom's determination to become a doctor and help those in need fills my heart with joy. Thanks to Tom, our days are filled with laughter and contentment. We look forward to continuing our happy life together. After my father suddenly passed away from an unexpected illness, leaving behind a staggering $2 million debt, my mother and brother Tom took matters into their own hands. They decided how to handle my father's inheritance without consulting me, leaving me to bear the brunt of the debt. My frustration with them reached a boiling point, but the thought of their future struggles made me smirk inwardly. I'm Nancy, a 24-year-old single woman working as a nursery teacher at a daycare. I graduated from a junior college and have always lived at home with my father, mother, and my brother Tom, who is close to my age. Since childhood, Tom and I haven't gotten along. A graduate of a prestigious university, Tom looked down on me for my junior college education. His arrogance was matched by his frequent mockery of my modest personality and average looks. "With your plain appearance and lack of impressive credentials, who would ever want to date you?" he would sneer. In reality, I do have a boyfriend, but I keep this a secret to avoid provoking Tom's scorn. Though Tom's sarcasm used to sting, those days are long behind me. I now take great pride in my work as a nursery teacher, finding immense joy in interacting with children and watching them grow. Tom's words no longer faze me. My mother, who reveres Tom for his prestigious university degree, constantly boasts about him to relatives and neighbors. In stark contrast, I was often treated as an afterthought. It was clear that my mother favored Tom and showered him with preferential treatment. Unlike her, my father always had my back. Whenever my mother gave snacks exclusively to Tom, my father would secretly share the same treats with me. He would proudly express his admiration for my choice to become a nursery teacher, and I deeply cherished his supportive gestures and words. My father was the CEO of a small company where Tom also worked. Unfortunately, the company's financial situation had been deteriorating recently. Despite my father's relentless efforts to cut the deficit and his late nights at the office, Tom remained indifferent. "I can't work for a company run by someone who looks so evenly poor," Tom said, resigning from the company to take a position elsewhere. Since her marriage, my mother had stopped working and fully dedicated herself to managing the household. With no experience in supporting my father's business, she didn't grasp the challenges he faced. Despite witnessing his daily struggles, she criticized him for the company's lack of success. "The company is still struggling. If you don't resolve the deficit soon, I won't be able to buy that new bag from the magazine. Honestly, what are you doing every day? You're completely useless," my mother said. She had an insatiable appetite for spending, especially on luxury items, often making impulsive purchases. Her dismissive attitude toward my father, as if she couldn't see the value of his hard work, filled me with outrage. Though I'm no business expert, I've witnessed my father's tireless efforts from a young age and understand how challenging it is to manage a business. My mother, who has been with him for years, should recognize this as well. I couldn't fathom why she would blame him as though he were incompetent. One day, my frustration boiled over, and I confronted my mother, demanding she stop belittling my father. Her response was dismissive and condescending. "Why should I be scolded by someone like you? People without an education should keep their opinions to themselves. Don't speak on things you don't understand," she retorted. Tom, seemingly influenced by my mother's attitude, joined in and criticized me harshly. It was clear that despite sharing the same blood, our values and personalities were worlds apart. "Nancy, don't let their words affect you. Education doesn't define your worth. Take pride in your role as a nursery teacher. That's what truly matters," my father said. His words of encouragement warmed my heart and bolstered my resolve. Even though part of me wanted to stand up to Tom and felt overshadowed by him, my father's support made me feel fearless. As long as he was by my side, I knew I could face anything. An unexpected event shattered my world. "Father," I was horrified to learn that my father had collapsed at work. The company staff who reached out to me said he was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Without hesitation, I dashed to the hospital, only to find that my mother and brother were nowhere to be seen. "I'm too busy to leave. You'll have to handle Dad's care," my mother said. I was stunned by her response. How could she claim to be too busy when my father's life was at stake? As a jobless person, surely she had more flexibility than I did. What could possibly be more important than being there for my father? In disbelief, I took care of the hospital formalities and listened to the doctor's grim news. My father had acute heart failure and only had a few days left. I visited him as often as I could, hoping to see his smile once more. A few days after his collapse, as if sensing my presence, he briefly regained consciousness while I held his hand. "Dad, I'm so relieved to see you. Do you recognize me? Can you hear my voice?" I pleaded desperately, but he looked at me with a distant, vacant stare before quietly closing his eyes, never to open them again. Until my father passed away, neither my mother nor Tom made any effort to visit him. They only appeared just before the funeral, clearly reluctant to oversee the arrangements. During our conversation there, it became apparent that my father's company had gone bankrupt, leaving behind a $2 million debt. "Inheritances come with debts," my mother said, her tone dripping with disdain. As the funeral proceeded, both she and Tom began to blame my father for the situation. He was unreliable in life, and now he's left us with this burden. "What a curse," they complained. "What are we supposed to do about all this debt?" my mother wondered aloud. "I have a suggestion," Tom said with a smirk, turning his gaze toward me. "Since Dad had such a soft spot for you, why don't you inherit everything? You can also take on the debt. It's only fair to repay the love you received from him," my mother added, her voice carrying a sense of cold expectation. Unbelievably, my mother and Tom were trying to offload both my father's inheritance and his debts onto me. Despite my father's passing, they were more concerned with their own interests than with mourning his loss. They had always belittled and ridiculed both my father and me, seeing us merely as tools for their gain. However, I had a plan in reserve, something my father had asked me to use if anything happened to him. It was time to put it into action. I decided to keep my true intentions hidden and reluctantly agreed to their demands, all while secretly preparing to execute my plan. "Understood. I will take on the entire estate, including the debt." My easy acquiescence surprised both my mother and Tom, considering I was assuming a $2 million debt. They probably anticipated more resistance from me, but their satisfaction in offloading the burden onto me seemed to eclipse any surprise. They looked at me with a mix of triumph and condescension. "So, you're actually going to pay off all the debt. We appreciate that. It's lucky for us, even if I don't quite understand your thinking. You really are quite naive, though. I suppose that's to be expected given your limited education," Tom said. My mother and Tom ultimately relinquished their claims to my father's estate. With no other relatives to contest the inheritance, I was the sole beneficiary. After my father's death, I moved out of the home I no longer wished to live in and began a new chapter on my own. It was then that I discreetly set my plan into motion. Several months after my father's passing, one day, "What on earth is this?" Tom, who I hadn't seen in a while, appeared visibly enraged, his face reddening as if he was on the verge of lashing out. His fury was likely triggered by seeing me emerge from a mansion that could only be described as extravagant. Why is Nancy, who supposedly inherited $2 million in debt and has such a low social status, living in a house like this? It was clear that this was the question Tom and my mother would be asking. Seeing your astonished faces is quite the reunion after so long. I'm glad to see you're doing well, I responded. Who do you think you are? Making jokes with no education. I want to know what's going on, Tom snapped. This is where I live. Is it really so surprising to see me coming out of my own home? Tom, growing increasingly agitated, advanced toward me. However, as a nursery teacher accustomed to lifting children daily, I had developed more strength than the average woman. Tom, who led a sedentary lifestyle and avoided exercise, was comparatively weak. I swiftly overpowered him and had him on the ground in no time. He looked utterly bewildered. As Tom lay on the ground and my mother rushed to his side, I smiled and began to explain. The reason I'm living here is because of the decision you both made to relinquish Dad's inheritance. Before he passed away, my father had been quietly building wealth through real estate to secure our future. Despite the company's debt, the market value of the properties increased significantly after I inherited the estate. I sold them at the right time, and even after accounting for inheritance taxes, the profit from the real estate exceeded $5 million. My father had anticipated this rise in value, which is why I took on the inheritance, despite the debt. Instead of using the proceeds to pay off the $2 million debt immediately, I first ensured that the employees of my father's company were fairly compensated. Additionally, I received a life insurance payout of $3 million. The amount was truly staggering. Wait a minute, life insurance is usually paid out to the spouse, right? My mother interjected. It appears Dad changed the beneficiary to me, I explained. He had informed me of this while he was still alive. My father was deeply troubled by your harsh words and excessive spending. To ensure that his life insurance money was used wisely, he trusted me to manage it and change the beneficiary. I have a dream that I've kept to myself, one to support and nurture children facing economic hardships. With the funds from my father's estate and the life insurance payout, I built a large house that could easily be called a mansion. While continuing my work as a nursery teacher, I am also applying the real estate investment skills I learned from my father to steadily grow my assets. After explaining everything, my mother and Tom were enraged, their voices rising in anger. This is absurd. Why didn't you tell us something so crucial? If we had known about the real estate, we never would have let you inherit it. I responded firmly. Dad anticipated that you would react exactly like this if he knew. That's why he kept it a secret, to prevent you from claiming everything. I didn't expect you to respond just as he predicted, but it seems he was right. What are you talking about? Regardless, we deserve our share of the inheritance. We have a right to it. I was taken aback by my mother's audacious demand for a portion of the assets. It was clear that when it came to money, people reveal their true nature. My mother and Tom were showing their cowardice and arrogance, just as I had always known them to be. You both forfeited that right when you renounced the inheritance. It's not possible to reclaim it now. I cannot hand over the hard-earned assets my father accumulated to people who are consumed by their own greed. The ignorant, uneducated one just won't stop whining. Quit your nagging and hand it over now, Tom shouted. Despite their continued baseless complaints, I had no choice but to call security to have them removed. They left quietly after being escorted out. In the following days, security footage showed them loitering near my house, trying to find a way to claim my father's inheritance. Their persistence was unsettling. Using the footage, I reported them to the police as suspicious individuals. After that, I no longer saw my mother or Tom around my home. After some time had passed, I learned about my mother and Tom's situation from a family friend who had been close to us for years. Tom had found a new job, but his self-centered attitude quickly earned him a poor reputation. Within less than a year, he had alienated his boss and was relegated to menial desk work, a far cry from the special treatment he had enjoyed as the president's son at my father's company. Eventually, the harsh work environment took its toll, and he left the job. His tarnished reputation made it challenging for him to find new employment within the industry. "Why aren't you working? Stop lazing around," my mother would admonish. "It's not like I'm just sitting around doing nothing," Tom would retort. "What kind of effort are you putting in, you useless, unemployed person?" my mother would criticize. After witnessing Tom's failure, her attitude toward him changed drastically. Once doting on him, she now blamed him for his incompetence and joblessness, growing increasingly cold and distant. The shift in my mother's behavior placed immense psychological pressure on Tom, eventually leading him to become a recluse. Having relied on my father's income for years and never having developed the skills or inclination to work, my mother now faces financial struggles alongside Tom. Both are struggling to make ends meet. As for me, I am happily married to the man I have been dating, and we now live in the large house I own. My husband shares my passion for helping children in economic need. Together, we are working towards this dream by setting up the necessary facilities and obtaining the required qualifications. I hold deep gratitude for my irreplaceable father, and with my husband by my side, I am living a fulfilling and purposeful life. My name's Harper. I'm 35, thriving in my marketing career, and for a while, I thought I had life all figured out. Then James came along, sweeping me off my feet. Before I knew it, we were walking down the aisle, saying, "I do." Crazy, right? But here's the twist. James came with a 12-year-old son, Tyler. Moving in with them felt like stepping into a minefield. I tried everything to win Tyler over. "Hey buddy, I made your favorite lasagna," I'd say, hoping for a smile. Instead, I'd get an eye roll and a mumbled, "Whatever." It was like talking to a brick wall. One night, I offered to help Tyler with his math homework. "Let's tackle these fractions together," I suggested. He slammed the book shut and snapped, "I don't need your help. You're not my mom." I turned to James, expecting him to step in. He just shrugged. Give him time. But time didn't fix things. Tyler's attitude only worsened. He ignored curfew, left messes everywhere, and constantly talked back. Whenever I tried to set boundaries, James would undercut me. "Harper, don't be so hard on him," he'd say. It was like I was losing my mind. Was I the problem? I needed to vent, so I called my best friend, Olivia. "Girl, you won't believe what Tyler did today." I started. "Spill the tea," she said, and I did. About Tyler's disrespect, James's lack of support, the whole mess. Olivia listened, then said, "Harper, honey, these are some serious red flags. Are you sure you're not in over your head?" "I don't know, Liv. I love James, but this is so rough." "I get it," she said, "but don't lose yourself trying to fix it. You matter too." Her words stuck with me, but I wasn't ready to give up. I threw myself into work, hoping things would smooth out at home. Big mistake. A few weeks later, my boss, Mr. Peterson, called me into his office. "Harper, is everything okay? Your last few presentations have been off." I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sir. Just a little stressed, but I'll get back on track." But as I left, I knew I wasn't fine. Something had to change. Then the phone rang. It was the school. "This is Miss Thompson, Tyler's teacher. We need you to come in immediately," she said, her tone serious. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the school, my mind racing. Had Tyler gotten into trouble? Was he hurt? When I arrived, Miss Thompson's expression was grim. "Mrs. Walker, Tyler has made a serious accusation against you." "What? What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart pounding. "He claims you've been physically abusing him," she said quietly. The world stopped. "That's impossible. I would never." I felt like I was drowning. Miss Thompson didn't waver. "We take these allegations very seriously. Child Protective Services has been notified." Just then, James burst in. "What's going on?" Miss Thompson explained the situation. I turned to James, desperate for him to defend me. "You know this isn't true, right?" But James looked torn. He turned to Tyler. "Is this true? Did Harper hurt you?" Tyler, avoiding eye contact, nodded. "Last week, she hit me while you were at work." "That never happened," I shouted, losing my composure. A CPS worker arrived soon after. "Mrs. Walker, we'll need you to leave the family home during our investigation." "Leave?" But I didn't do anything. James finally spoke, his voice low. "Maybe it's for the best, Harper, just until we figure this out." It felt like a slap. "You can't seriously believe this." James wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what to believe right now." In a daze, I packed a bag and called Olivia. Can I stay with you? I'll explain everything when I get there. At her apartment, I broke down. Between sobs, I told her everything. That little brat. Olivia fumed. And James, how dare he not stand up for you? I don't know what to do, Liv. My whole life is falling apart. Olivia hugged me tight. First things first, we're getting you a lawyer. I know just the person. The next day, we met with Sandra Davis, a sharp-eyed attorney specializing in family law. This is a serious situation, Harper, Sandra said, but false accusations do happen. We'll fight this. Back at work, whispers followed me everywhere. Did you hear Harper beat her stepson? My colleague Mark asked. I always thought there was something off about her. Later, Mark approached my desk. Tough break, huh? Kids say the darndest things. He's lying, Mark. I didn't touch him, I said through gritted teeth. Hey, I'm just saying, where there's smoke. He trailed off as I stormed away, locking myself in the bathroom. I called Olivia, my voice shaking. I can't do this, Liv. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. Listen to me, Olivia said, her voice steady. You were strong. You were innocent. We'll get through this. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, scared, but there was a spark of determination in my eyes. I will not let them break me, I whispered to myself. I will fight this, and I will win. In the following weeks, Sandra and I worked tirelessly to build my case. We need character witnesses, she explained. Anyone who can vouch for your relationship with Tyler. I thought hard. Mr. Peterson, he's seen me with Tyler at company picnics. When I called, Mr. Peterson didn't hesitate. Of course I'll testify. I've seen you with Tyler. You're patient and kind. Tears welled up as I hung up. At least someone believed in me. Sandra also arranged for a psychological evaluation. After several sessions, Dr. Ramirez concluded, I see no signs of abusive tendencies. In fact, you show a strong desire to nurture and protect. It was a small victory, but I'd take what I could get. Meanwhile, James had gone radio silent. The few times he did reach out, it was all about him. People are talking, Harper. This is really affecting my business, he said one day. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Your business, James? My entire life is falling apart. He hung up without another word. A few days later, Olivia called, her voice tight with anger. You won't believe what I just heard. What now? I sighed. I was at Starbucks and overheard James talking to some neighbors. He was badmouthing you, Harper, saying he should have known better than to marry someone he barely knew. The betrayal stung like a physical blow. He said that. After everything I've done for him and Tyler? I'm so sorry, honey. You deserve better than this, Olivia said gently. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Miss Thompson, Tyler's teacher, contacted Sandra, requesting an urgent meeting. I've noticed some inconsistencies in Tyler's story, she explained, looking uncomfortable. And, well, I did some digging. This isn't the first time Tyler has made false accusations. My heart raced. What do you mean? Miss Thompson sighed. Last year, he accused a teacher of favoritism when he didn't get the lead in the school play. It was investigated and found to be completely fabricated. Sandra leaned forward. And you're just bringing this up now. I feel terrible, Miss Thompson admitted. I should have looked into this history more thoroughly before escalating things. I'm here to make it right. As the investigation deepened, more truths came to light. Tyler's school counselor revealed a pattern of manipulative behavior, often playing James and me against each other. Tyler shows signs of severe emotional neglect, the counselor explained. He creates drama to get attention. It all started making sense, the acting out, the lies, the manipulation. Tyler was crying out for help in the worst way possible, but the most shocking revelation came from Tyler's best friend, Kevin. In a moment of guilt, Kevin confessed to Sandra that Tyler had bragged about his plan. He said he was going to make up stuff about his stepmom so his dad would kick her out, Kevin admitted. He said his dad always believes him and buys him stuff to make up for it. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, pity, and heartbreak. Tyler had been hurting for so long, and James had been too blind to see it. As the truth unraveled, I couldn't help but think back to all the red flags I'd ignored. How James would brush off Tyler's bad behavior, the expensive gifts that appeared after every tantrum. I should have seen it, I told Olivia over coffee. I was so focused on making things work, I missed what was really going on. You can't blame yourself, Olivia said, squeezing my hand. You were trying to be a good wife and stepmom. I nodded, a new determination settling in. You're right, now it's time to start fighting for myself. The day the case was officially dropped should have felt like a victory, but it was bittersweet. My name was cleared, but the damage was done. I couldn't go back to that house, to James and Tyler. It wasn't home anymore. I met with Sandra to discuss the next steps. I want a divorce, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Sandra nodded, unsurprised. We'll cite James's lack of support and Tyler's false accusations. It should be straightforward. Straightforward, maybe, but not easy. Every signature on those papers felt like closing a chapter of my life I'd never get back. At work, I threw myself into every project. Mr. Peterson noticed. Harper, your performance these past few months has been exceptional, he said during my review. I'm promoting you to senior marketing director. I nearly fell out of my chair. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. He smiled. There's more. The position is in our New York office. A fresh start, if you want it. I didn't even hesitate. I'll take it. As I packed up my life, Olivia helped, filling me in on the local gossip. James is having a rough time, she said. Lost a bunch of clients when the truth came out. And Tyler, he got suspended for bullying. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but something close. I hope they got the help they needed. Both of them. New York was everything I needed. A new job, a new apartment, a new me. I even started volunteering at a youth center, mentoring kids from troubled homes. It felt good to use my experiences to help others. 2 years flew by, and one afternoon I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant brought in a letter. The return address made my heart skip. Tyler's old school. Inside was a note from Miss Thompson. Dear Harper, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to inform you that Tyler has been caught in a serious lie at his new school. He's facing expulsion. James has reached out for help, but I thought you should know. Sincerely, Miss Thompson. I sat back, a whirlwind of emotions hitting me. Part of me wanted to laugh at that irony. Another part ached for the troubled kid I tried so hard to help. You okay, boss? My assistant Jen asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. I smiled, folding the letter. Just a blast from the past, nothing to worry about. That night, as I got ready for my date with Michael, a kind, understanding man I'd met through my volunteer work, I thought about how far I'd come. 2 years ago, I was fighting to prove my innocence. Now, I was thriving in a job I loved, helping kids who needed it, and dating someone who respected me. As Michael and I walked to dinner, hand in hand, I realized something. I was happy, truly, genuinely happy. What are you smiling about? Michael asked, squeezing my hand. I looked up at the New York skyline, my adopted home, just thinking about how sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best places. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Well, I'm glad whatever happened led you here. Me too, I thought. I'd survived, I'd thrived, and I'd found happiness. Meanwhile, those who had wronged me were facing the consequences of their actions. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, and the best revenge was living well. As we entered the restaurant, I made a decision. That letter, I wasn't going to respond. That chapter of my life was closed. I had a new story to write, and I couldn't wait to see how it unfolded. The story ends here, but the conversation is just beginning. What would you have done in Harper's shoes? If you received that letter about Tyler 2 years later, would you have responded, offering help despite the pain he caused? Or would you have kept that chapter firmly closed? Your experiences shape your perspective, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your answer in the comments below.